This week on the CounterSurveil Podcast, brought to you by Iron Geek's YouTube channel, we're excited to welcome a true cybersecurity heavyweight. Meet Scott Schober, President and CEO of Berkeley Varitronics Systems, a company at the forefront of wireless security for over 50 years. Scott isn't just a business leader, he's a cybersecurity guru who's literally written the books on staying safe in our digital world. As the author of Hacked Again, Cybersecurity is Everybody's Business, and Senior Cyber, Scott brings real-world experience to the table. A regular speaker at major tech conferences and a familiar face on news networks, Scott breaks down complex security issues for audiences worldwide. You've seen him on ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox and more, sharing his insights on the latest cyber threats and how to combat them. This week, Scott joins us to discuss emerging trends in wireless security, the latest cybersecurity challenges, and practical tips for staying safe online. Don't miss this opportunity to learn from one of the best in the business. Tune in to the CounterSurveil Podcast on Iron Geek's YouTube channel Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern. Your digital safety might depend on it.
We're free in the spotlight, shining through the late night. Smart contracts are lying, auditing, verifying. CounterSurveil in my ear. Security we engineer. Learn the truth, don't disappear. CounterSurveil, we're right here.
Welcome, Scott, and also special guest Drew Porter. Sledge, why don't you give a warm welcome to Drew, who as well, and give a little overview on who Drew is, since everybody knows also who Scott is now, thanks to that intro.
Well, I can introduce Drew as being a longtime friend, owner of Red Mesa, but I'll let him take it from there because I haven't talked to him in a long time. Tell us about yourself.
Hi, my name is Drew. I am the owner of Red Mesa. I'm the CEO of Red Team Alliance, and relevant to this podcast, I'll give the general one. My background is in signals and electronic warfare on the development of the capability side, not the military or the government side. But my tools were used for those purposes. And then I'm an expert in covert methods of entry, in particular, clandestine methods of entry when it comes to breaking into other governments' facilities.
Well said.
Perfect.
And Scott, high level on yourself.
Hey, everybody. Great to be here with you. I'm running a 52-year-old company. We make wireless threat detection tools. And kind of we're at the intersection where wireless and cyber kind of crisscross there. So we deal with mostly U.S. DoD agencies and a lot of security companies, and try to help them keep any type of wireless threats, be it cellular, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and other signals there from causing havoc.
It's going to cause me.
Well, thanks for being here, Scott. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, great to be here with you guys.
Excellent. So let's kick it off. Scott, in your tenure as somebody running a 52-year-old company, how have you stayed relevant in 52 years?
Yeah, good
lots
question.
probably changed.
Constantly learning. And I learned from great podcasts such as this, by reading a lot, by attending a lot of different trade shows. I try to go each year to the RSA, the Black Hat, DEF CON, but then a lot of the smaller events as well. I do present at a lot of them and do a lot of radio. I do a daily radio show for Cybersecurity Ventures, Cybercrime Radio. So I cover the headlines on that, which requires some research and being able to explain those things, and presented a lot of the industry events also. And I think that's important because it forces you to regularly consume and understand technology and changes and kind of try to get inside of a hacker's head a little bit, because we're the good guys trying to build equipment to keep people safe, and government agencies, law enforcement, consumers, you name it. So, it's a constant learning curve. I surround myself with people traditionally that are a lot smarter than me, the engineers working on these things and innovating. And I think that helps me to keep up with it. on a regular basis. So not much sleep there, that's for sure.
So saith we all.
Yes.
Next question. Can you explain some of the latest techniques that you're aware of that hackers are using to exploit wireless networks and devices?
Sure. A lot of ground to cover under that, but I could pick just one area, for example, that kind of crisscrosses that. We've been doing a lot of research lately with skimmers, shimmers, different types of NFC, stealing credit cards. Most of it, the focus is in ATMs, but also fuel dispensers and POS card terminal readers there. Much of the work that cyber criminals do is they go for the easy hacks and steals. They want to steal your credit card as quick as they can. So they'll typically mess up the credit card readers, the tap and pay, which is secure, or chip and pin, which again is much more secure than traditional swipe, forcing everybody to go over the traditional swipe. And that's where they're putting skimmers in. And then they're traditionally tying that to Bluetooth usually because it's so cheap, it's so easy. And they don't have to come back to the crime scene and pull off their keypad overlay or get inside the neck of the ATM again, or open up the fuel dispenser because it's got Bluetooth connectivity. And they could stay usually within 7,500 feet and then collect the daily cards that have been stolen, go burn fresh cards, and they're in business and they're going shopping or sell it on the dark web. So a lot of our tools really are designed to counter those threats, give law enforcement, give banks, give gas stations, give convenience store owners a simple way to test to see, hey, is there a hidden skimmer inside of here? And give me a red light, green light, basically. Is it safe or not safe to keep the consumers safe? So we're doing tons of work there, and it's been really exciting. We've sold thousands of units, and I often present on the problem. So I do all the major trade shows and then a lot of financial shows and crime investigation shows where there's that component of it in the mix there. So it's pretty exciting stuff. I'm going to be heading out next week to Vegas. There's a big ATM show that we were asked to go to, so I'll be there. And then 2 weeks later, I'll be in Texas at Fort Worth, the Texas Financial Crimes Group there. They have a skimming task force there. So we're going to meet up with them and go over products and do a lot of learning. So we're helping them learn. They're helping us, working together with law enforcement as well as the private sector. I think is important to share technologies and tips and really just keep educating one another. That's just one narrow aspect there alone that we've been dealing with lately. And it's very hot because the problem is so bad. As probably your listeners may have heard, many Romanian cyber criminal gangs have actually come here. And when I talk about gangs, I'm not talking 10 or 20. There's well over 1,000 individuals that have been identified as part of this cyber gang. And they've been working state by state, going through, placing skimmers everywhere, mapping it out, stealing credit cards. My estimates on research is a little more than $2 billion they're getting each year just in the United States alone, which is astronomical amount of money. So we're working closely with a lot of the Secret Service and other law enforcements locally to get these skimmers out of the machines and use whatever techniques we can.
So I have a question for you. When we're talking about these skimmer detectors, is the price point somewhere where a normal consumer can use it, or is it something for like a business to purchase?
I don't view it as much as consumers. That being said, there have been consumers that have actually used it. A lot of people that are on the road all the time, and I hear from truckers sometimes, they're filling up often, they're getting diesel, this and that, and they're finding their cards are getting scammed. Some of them have bought in our product Skim Scan, and we sell it for $430.
Okay, that's not bad. Okay.
It's a little bit more pricey than what I would consider a consumer device. If we get up to the neighborhood of 10,000 or more someday, hopefully we could bring that price point down in some of the manufacturing. It's just not there yet, but it'll happen with time, I think.
I've actually heard of that before, and we were talking about it in another group. Like, is this for real? But yeah, cool.
It's really popular, and I think that to me the important thing, and this is where I kind of get excited from the innovation side, is hearing the feedback from other people. Everybody thinks they got the best idea, and this is fabulous, and sliced bread, this and that. But when you listen to users, when you listen to critics, how to improve a product and make it better and more useful, I think that's when you actually do the best. When we first launched it, it was probably 5 years ago. we honestly didn't sell hardly any. I think we sold 100 in a year, and I was very disappointed. And I said, what is going on? Is this not a problem? Or am I missing something? And with time, people caught on, and honestly, word of mouth, people start talking, and they say, geez, I bought this thing for like 400 something bucks, and I found a bunch of skimmers. That person tells someone else. This law enforcement group tells someone else. Next thing you know, we're getting these orders, and some of these orders are nice. We'll get 200 units on a single order, and they're dispensing them everywhere, and they're using them, and then they're giving us that feedback. This is great. I wish you could just do this, this, and this. So we go back to the drawing board. Let's improve that, tweak this, adjust this, and make it a better product. That to me is the most important. Don't just be happy selling things and collecting money. Make it the best you can for the end user. Then you'll have success down the road.
That would be something cool to have. Typically, I usually find skimmers the hard way.
I have myself too.
I've been telling people for a long time, pull before you push.
Yeah.
You know, grab a hold of it, give it a yank.
Well,
because a lot of times they'll just pop right off.
There's a new one though.
You mentioned
they disable it and make you go inside to ring it up on the cash register, and I saw the freaking skimmer on the cable sitting there.
And keep in mind, let's take an ATM, which is very typical. In the past, they used to take the skimmer and they would mount it into a fake bezel. And you put a little lithium battery there, second magnetic read head, pretty simple. And they would epoxy it on there, put sticky tape on there. And they tell everybody, go to the ATM and yank the thing. And if you see it crack off or come off, stop. It might be a skimmer in there. Those days are kind of gone. That's not where they're putting the skimmers. The new type of skimmer threat is a deep insert skimmer. And they have a long metal tool about 10 inches. And it's a small, flexible PCB, very thin, that they slide in and it locks in place inside the reader. So to the visible eye, you cannot see the skimmer anymore. And it's not in the plastic bezel on the outside. It's inside the neck, the body of the actual card reader. And I think the fact that they can do that, it seems impossible until you see one of these and hold it and see how thin the lithium battery is, how thin the circuitry is. It blows your mind. And that's really the latest threat, because you go back 10 years, skimmers were there. It's not that it's that new. It's the fact they could shrink them down. And then the fact on top of it, they could run the battery for a real long time, integrate a small Bluetooth module in there. And it's traditionally Bluetooth classic. It's not Bluetooth low energy, surprisingly, as many would think, because we also make some scanners that will sniff and look for specific IDs for the manufacturer for what Bluetooth module is associated to that skimmer. So you could quickly point at an ATM, fuel pump, whatever, and say, hey, there's a really strong 2.4 gigahertz fast frequency hopper signal coming out of there with an ID that's made consistent with skimmers. Boom, stop right there.
So you basically have a blacklist of specific MAC addresses?
Exactly. Yeah,
cool.
Yeah, that's exactly what we do. And we have it so an instant alert pops up on your screen, and then you click on that, and then you discriminate, ignore everything else. And we have an antenna with some gain on it as well. The typical unit, we have a conical antenna. We point it there, and it's got some gain on it. So now you see a real weak signal, really strong, and usually you're only a foot or two away. There's nothing else that is that strong there. You'll ignore phones and other things in the area, and now you can pinpoint and say, stop, there's something in here that's transmitting. And I think that's really important to do.
Neat.
Yeah,
I like it.
Totally. Drew, you have any opinion on that?
No, I mean, I have seen, I don't know if it was your device.
I think it was. I think we were talking about his in our chat.
Okay, then it was your device that we had seen in action before, and it was pretty neat device. So yeah, I for the price point, and it does sound about the same price that it was in the chat. It was we saw a law enforcement officer using it, and and it was about that price point that you mentioned. So Steve is probably correct in saying it was your device. And it was super slick, right? I travel all the time. I don't have one of your devices. Mostly I just use, virtual cards now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Instead of using my actual card.
Yeah, that's smart.
But yeah, no, I mean, the fact that seeing, and you are correct where you say, seeing the modern skimmers, it's amazing. So years ago, a few years ago, I was speaking at a FinCEN conference, and they brought out like a ton of different. There's a FBI and Secret Service person there, and they brought out a ton of different little skimmers that were being used. And these skimmers aren't just being used for credit card theft. In the gaming world, and the gaming being casino gaming, they're being used to steal people's points, their reward points on their cards as well. So they'll skim that data off that card. They'll make one of those cards and start using their reward points for comps around the hotel as that person.
Wow.
So
Yeah, that's smart. Wow. That's scary. And
I-
I think I was going to add, the thing that I find funny is that, like just look at the petroleum industry. There was one woman I talked to, this was last year sometime. She called me up. She didn't know anything about skimmers. So I was sharing on the phone some education, sent her some e-papers so she could be educated on it. And she bought one of our devices and tried it. And then I got a call back not too long later, a couple months later. And she said, Scott, you won't believe it. We found a skimmer with your skim scan. I was like, oh, that's great. Congratulations. Glad you got it out there. And hopefully your customers are happy, this and that. And it was a small mom and pop gas station. The funny part was, I said, how many pumps do you have? And she said, oh, well, we have 12 pumps. She goes, the funny thing was there was a skimmer in each of the pumps. And I was like, oh my, you're kidding me. I said, how long were they in there? And she said, I have absolutely no idea, because I never knew what a skimmer was until I was turned on to your company, learned about it, got your tool, found it, checked every pump, and we found a skimmer in each one, had to shut it down, bring in law enforcement, federal investigation, so on and so forth. And I'm sitting there thinking, geez, imagine if you're a small mom and pop, or even a big one, and you're going there week after week to get your gas, because I usually go once a week when in my commute, and then I get my card stolen, and I'm not knowing why, and you're getting your card reissued again and again and again. That costs consumers a lot of money, and no one ever thought, or nobody locally ever said, hey, isn't there a problem here? My card keeps getting skimmed, and they trace it back. I'm not sure why, but it was a little bit of an eye-opener how bad the problem actually is.
There's
another thing that stands out in my mind. I don't know if you guys ever heard of this, and this was kind of cool when I first learned about it. And I'm on the National Weights and Measures Skimming Task Force, also the group based out of Florida. So I got some formal training there, spent the day in the field, identifying, opening up pumps, understanding how they place them, so on and so forth. So that really helped to get the background knowledge and the training, working with Secret Service and law enforcement as a private company. But one thing I learned in some of those meetings was one of the more popular things to do. And if you guys do this, you ever go to an ATM after hours, typically there's a glass vestibule. And what do? You got to walk up and you take your card, you stick it in the door, and you hear bzz, it unlocks the solenoid or whatever to get in there to go into the ATM. Well, a lot of the cyber criminals said, geez, screw the ATM. Let's just stick the skimmer right there at the door. And they were going crazy skimming cards because people are coming in after hours, sticking their card in, innocently thinking, door unlocks, they skimmed their card, they go in, they never even touch the ATM. But now they've got all these stolen cards there. No one ever thought to look and the actual mechanism there to let you in, that skimmers can easily be placed there. And if you look, they're kind of traditional screws on there that are, somewhat tamper-proof, as you go to McMaster or anywhere else and buy that thing, put the bit in, bzz, bzz, pull it off, put the skimmer in, put it back, you're in business. And this is happening throughout the nation, and people are not realizing it, and banks aren't, and they're not checking that spot there. And I thought that was kind of an eye-opener for me. And I talk to banks all the time about this, and they go, never even heard of that. No one's ever told us. Thank you. We're going to take a look, and we'll take it apart and talk to our security team. But I think part of it is the more I learn and the more knowledge that's shared, I think others will learn and spread this knowledge, because a lot of knowledge is not getting out there. A lot of people are so worried about their job, 9 to 5, running a business, making a profit. When it comes to security or cybersecurity, they say, well, it's not my job, that's above my pay grade, or a geek has to come in and do this. And that's not good. It's really all of our job. And I think that's really important.
One thing you mentioned was the financial hit to the individual users. Recently, I read some articles that talked about laws that are being either proposed or in place where the operator is held financially responsible for the loss. So your mom and pop gas station may be getting contacted either by their credit card processor, or someone saying, hey, you're doing fraud. It's your responsibility to clean that up, and now you're on the hook for X many dollars.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a really good point. And think about the problem. Give the example of a fuel station, XYZ gas station. This is very common. Law enforcement told me this. They said oftentimes when there is a skimmer detected, what do? They unplug it and they throw it in a box behind the gas station. They don't report it. Why? When you report it, it's a federal crime, first of all. So what does that mean? Investigation, shut the pump down or the station. The local news team usually hears about it, comes and they say, hey, at 57 Commerce Avenue, that this fuel company has skimmers. All of a sudden they lose business. So they said, why report it? Just rip the skimmer out, throw it in a box. And they said they went to the back of one gas station. The guy had 100 skimmers in a box. As fast as he pulls them out, the next, the middle of the night, someone comes in, places another skimmer. And this is just a cat and mouse game going on and on. So there's no real incentive or pressure for somebody to report that there's a skimmer in there. For many gas station attendants and owners, they say, skip it. Just throw it in the garbage. Don't report it, or we might lose revenue. Because think about it. If you're a gas station, whether or not you take money from a legitimate customer, or if it's skimmed and someone steals it, you're still pumping gas and you're making money. And that's really what they don't want to slow down and stop. So until there is an actual level of government intervention and laws in place that channel down from the issuing bank, that forces the gas stations, the convenience stores, the banks, whatever, to upgrade the security, it's not gonna happen. And that's kind of the same analogy I used back when Target was compromised way back in 2013. It forced this compliance and said, hey, if you don't upgrade your security and your POS terminal to chip and pin over the next 2 years, there's going to be a liability shift down to you, and you as the merchant is going to cover it, not the issuing bank, not the credit card company. Same thing needs to happen in the world of banking and petroleum industry.
Now, there's
When
another angle to that, you mentioned gangs.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say a gang comes in, puts a skimmer on your terminal, okay, and you take it off. The next thing you know, a gang member shows up and says, "So, I saw you took the skimmer off, and I'm going to put it back on here. And if I ever find it missing again, you're going to be missing."
Yeah, and that's very true. And oftentimes there's something in between that. They say, "Look, here's some money. Turn your head and walk away." And they say, "Okay, don't hurt me. Don't do anything. Leave me alone." And put a little money in my pocket, and they just ignore the fact. And they put the skimmers in, and commerce is going on, and that's a big problem. And that's not good. In fact, the other day I was talking, one of the big scams that has happened, and it's happened here in New Jersey, it's happened down in Florida and many other states, is where somebody pulls up to the gas pump, they install skimmers, it starts stealing cards, they take that stolen data, they go back to their shop, they burn fresh cards, they come back and they have a pickup truck with a cab on the back. It's got a 600 bladder in there and to hold gas, and they have a second nozzle that you could put in, and they take typically diesel fuel. They'll pump about 600 gallons of diesel fuel with your stolen card, my stolen card, whoever they skimmed. They drive around the corner, they meet up with the tanker truck, and now they pump that stolen fuel on our cards into the tanker truck. That tanker truck goes back to the station and sells that gas back there. So you see this revolving pyramid scam that's going on with cyber criminals. Well organized. It's very lucrative. Diesel costs a lot of money, and it's 600 gallons a pop. And this is happening day in, day out. This scam, they're getting away with a lot of money. And again, it's on consumers that are paying for it. The average estimate is about 4% of the interest that's collected from consumer debt on credit cards. That covers the loss. That's how much it is. Now, it doesn't sound like 4%. What's the big deal? But think of how much interest when a card is 20 to 29% interest they're collecting on poor people throughout America that can't afford their bills. 4% is billions of dollars. So it's a lot of money that's covering all of this. Now, we got great laws right here in the United States for liability protection. Did you ever have your card compromised? I had my credit card compromised probably about 8 times. And years back when our company was first hacked, I had debit card personally, credit card personally, and a company credit card and a company debit card. All four at the same time got compromised. Talk about paperwork and a nightmare. And then we had $65,000 stolen out of our checking. Our Twitter account, my Twitter account was hacked. We had DDoS attacks to our web store, and we couldn't have any commerce and sell products for a period of time because it was so bad. I had my attempted identity theft recently at a bank, somebody impersonating me, trying to access our account and take money out. So I'm a constant target, and I've made mistakes in the past. That was when I wrote my first book, Hacked Again, because all the mistakes and things that I made, I try to share with people so they don't go down that same path and make the mistakes that I have. But again, I'm targeted. Again and again, this keeps happening to me. So I've had to do some unique things just to stay off the radar for some of these hackers because they don't give up. They are smart and they're relentless. If they want to get you, they will get you.
I wanted to bring up the point that you made about, or somebody made, the point that was brought up regarding the gangs, right? There's a Shell gas station near me where I got my card stolen, and then I started watching on Nextdoor, and they kept getting their cards stolen. And how they did it was, it seemed like the owner was in on it because they disabled the payment on the pump itself, and you'd have to go in. And when I did that, I saw the skimmer sitting there. I was like, I know what that is. And I talked to the bank. They refunded all my money because all of my entire bank account was just drained. So Wells Fargo gave me my money back, and they got law enforcement involved. I talked with some of the management at the bank, and they were like, oh, yeah, this has been rampant around this area lately. So they're at least working on it.
Yeah. And this is happening throughout the nation, unfortunately. Go to other countries, and skimming is not a problem like it is here in the United States. It does exist, but not to the level. It's not as lucrative as it is here. And think about it. Something like, look at a gas pump. How easy is it to put a Bluetooth skimmer in a gas pump? I can go on eBay right now, and there's basically 6 keys that open 90% of all the 1.5 million gas pumps. It's a joke. And it takes about 10 to 15 seconds for somebody who watches a couple YouTube videos to take one of these generic six keys, figure out which one, open the door, plug it into the top of the card reader there, hide it in the rat's nest of stuff, close the door. You could block the camera, park, do whatever. It's easy to do these things. It really is. It doesn't take somebody that's an advanced cyber criminal. That's what I think a lot of people think. A lot of these people are just basic people that are willing to take a risk to get caught, and they're from another country. They're getting paid a lot of money, and they say, let me try it. It's a good way to make money. I've met so far 2 individuals that their part-time job is putting skimmers in ATMs. I mentioned this because I was presenting it at a conference, a cybersecurity conference, and I was talking about skimmers and things like that. And afterward, they took me aside, the one individual did, and started asking me a lot of questions. And I answered some of them. I said, wait a second. I said, some of these questions are something that a criminal would really need to know, not the average person inquiring or just trying to educate themselves. I said, are you placing skimmers? And the guy kind of got sheepish and looked down and he goes, yeah, I do it on the side. I said, really? How much money do you make doing this? He says, I pick up about 40 grand a week in cash extra. Placing
Good God.
skimmers. That's a lot of cash to make on the side. And I said, I said, I feel terrible. I should be reporting you. I said, I don't have any proof or evidence, but why don't you go home and think about this? Because what you're doing is terrible. You are ripping people off. And know what he said to me? He goes, yeah, but you know what? It's not like I'm stealing from them or robbing. The credit card company gives them their money back. There's good laws. Yep. I never see the person, so it's kind of a faceless crime. You don't make a connection with the victim, so you feel kind of independent of it. And I think that's part of the problem, fundamentally. You can do this as a
just
side
kind of
gig.
Detached from it.
Yeah, and you don't feel the emotional attachment. Think about the old days. You're a bank robber. What do you put a mask on? Maybe you pull up in your getaway car. You got your gun and you disguise your voice. They could pick up on your voice, maybe your height, your hair color, the vehicle tag, different things or tells to catch you. Maybe they taint the bag there with some exploding stuff or whatever. all of these things can deter, but they're easy to catch the person and track them. Nowadays, the dark web, you're anonymous. You're using Bitcoin, which is somewhat anonymous. You're buying and selling things to strangers and ripping them off. You're stealing money. It's pretty easy to do. It doesn't take a whole lot, just a little bit of being innovative, I think, these days. And that's part of the problem.
Yeah.
Thank you. Altke, you had a question?
Yes. So I know that half the guys putting these skimmers in ain't the brightest things in the noggin. Where are they getting these skimmers reliably? Because they ain't making them.
No, they don't. In fact, most of them are actually mass produced in China. You can get them on the dark web. You can actually get them on the regular web. You go to Alibaba, they sell them. eBay, they sell them sometimes. They usually get pulled down quickly. I haven't found them on Amazon yet. Mostly dark websites you can buy things. In fact, it's a funny story. We're trying to acquire a few of the shimmers. A shimmer is really a little bit different. It's a man-in-the-middle attack where they're sitting between your chip on the card that gets inserted in the front of the machine and the actual reader. And they steal the power from the reader, and they steal the chip information. Cyber criminals have not been able to effectively burn a fresh chip and program a chip, stealing that data, because again, it's encrypted, it's tokenized one time through the ecosystem. It's hard to do all that, and they don't need to. Why? Because they found a loophole. They could take that stolen data, they have the decryption key, they could then parse it, and they could burn it to a regular, fresh, old school magstripe card and go shopping. So that's what a shimmer does. And in the process of trying to obtain a shimmer through legal channels, through law enforcement, we were denied because it's evidence, we can't share it, blah, blah, blah. So I was able to obtain some schematics on the dark web and kind of reverse engineer it. And we're developing a shimmer detector tool right now. We're going to be working closely with some financial crimes investigation units soon to test it out. But in the process of it, we went on the dark web to buy a couple of them so we can, speed up our development. And in 2 cases, we got screwed. We paid by Bitcoin, and they took our money and shipped it all. We got it all the way from another country. It ended up in Texas as far as we could get it. And then it was seized, unfortunately. The problem is we're working for law enforcement, but when law enforcement finds things, they'll seize it. And they'll track down these bad guys, and they're nailing them. So, and we got a kind of a somewhat of approval from law enforcement. Said, guys, look, here's the best way to go by, and we can't give them anything. But if you do this, create an alias and a fake company, and use Bitcoin or Bitcoin through Ether, through this and that, and create a safe channel so you don't get caught and it's not associated to you. You'll be okay. We can't find you, and no one else will. So that's what we did.
You got to wash it just right.
Yeah, exactly. But we were kind of screwed out of the Bitcoin, and finally we said, okay, stop. We're just going to develop this hard way, roll up our sleeves and figure it out, because it's not that difficult, but there are some little tricks that they're doing there, and they're selling it. The first ones that came out were about $3,300 US dollars. So they're not cheap, these shimmers, because they're not that widely used yet. I've only known so far in my presentations 2 that have been recovered so far from ATMs. Shimmers, this is. Skimmers, they're cheap. They're a dime a dozen. You could pick up a skimmer for $600 to $700 on the dark web any day. It's
Cheap.
pretty easy.
But I would imagine that if the tech was really all that good, they'd be using them themselves instead of trying to sell them to you. Like, sure, they don't want to take a risk, but they're still taking a risk by selling them.
Exactly.
So at what point would you have to look at and be like, oh yeah, there's no meat left on the bones, even if this thing was real?
Yeah, and there's some risk, and to some degree, the best way to buy things like that, I'm sure you guys are familiar with the dark web, and probably a lot of your listeners, you got to be a criminal a little bit. You got to take on that persona. You got to get in that environment and buy and sell things and build trust and grow in that environment. I liken it back to the days I used to be a game pirater in the days my father worked at Atari, and my brother and I, we amassed every game that was ever made from Atari and Apple Computer, and we were getting on all the bulletin boards, and you'd work with the ISOPs until you can get close to them and hack through the passwords, copy the games, and then we would trade them around the world with people. And I can't tell you how many games we got, but we got to the point where we developed an EEPROM blower where we could actually burn our, we'd have stacks of hundreds of cartridges, and we would take one cartridge and copy it. We built the cartridge copier basically, and we'd write our own labels on the games and things like that. And my friends are always like, how come your games don't have any real labels on it? What are you guys doing? Like, what's wrong with this? And I was like, well, we just get cheap games or something like that.
Printer ink cost a lot less back
Yeah, printer was no good. and it
That's
must have
that's
wore off.
awesome. That's
Here's a
awesome.
question
lot of
for
fun.
you about acquiring these toys. What's stopping you from getting on a plane, going to China, go down to the Gungadung district, go to the outside flea market and say, hey, American dollars need skimmer, get a bunch of them, and then you're a legitimate company. You put these electronic parts in there and you say, I'm a legitimate security company. TSA can't tell a skimmer from a dildo. I mean, you should have no
Confirmed.
problem getting them in that way.
Yeah, it's really easy. And the funny thing is, and this is the part with one of our Bluetooth skimmer detectors that we've coupled to a DF antenna, and we made a database of known IDs for these Bluetooth-enabled skimmers. I wish I could say we were like really advanced with algorithms, sophistication. We're not. These were well-known, cheap Chinese Bluetooth classic modules that everybody knows the exact ID, and it's hard-coded in there. Some of them you can program it. Sometimes you can hide the ID. These IDs are hard-coded in there so they don't ever change, and they actually display them. So you could see it on your phone. You could see it on our Bluetooth detector, which is kind of funny. And the password they use on all of them is 1234.
There's actually a question there. Can you mask that ID?
They don't mask them, and with that module, you cannot. Other modules you can. You could hide it. You could change. You could do a lot of different things. They don't do it with that, and hence that's part of for us the fun of it. Like this is so easy. It's just a scan, gives you an instant alert. You point to the machine. Yeah, there's the specific ID. It's in the database. We got a strong hot signal. Open it up. Boom. We got another skimmer. So for us, it was glory. We couldn't be happier about that. You would think that they would up the game and change that. However, these things are crazy. I got a copy of a map once that showed all the skimmers, and this was on one of the task force groups we were out with Florida, and it had, I think, 183 skimmers, the placement of all of them. This was one person. And it showed them the map and the route, and each skimmer was numbered, number 1, number 2, up to 183. I said, holy cow, that's one person with a map, and they got 183 skimmers that's their responsibility to go there each day or one time a week and download all the stolen credit card information. Because again, the buffers in a lot of these can only hold about 1,600 to 2,000 stolen cards. So if there's a lot of activity at that particular gas pump, they got to go there more often to download the stolen cards and wipe it so they can keep collecting more cards. And this is like just a revolving thing that they're doing. And then, of course, they're taking these large lists of usually about 10,000 at a time of stolen cards, and they'll parse it and they'll present it on the dark web, and they'll sell it for 50 cents to $1.50 per stolen card. It's really not that valuable. Or sometimes they'll do is they'll take it, you guys are probably familiar with, they'll go out, they'll buy a bunch of gift cards, buy a $100 gift card for Victoria's Secret, go to their girlfriend and say, give me $50 cash, give her the $100 gift card and go spend it. Almost like a means of laundering money is what they'll typically do with this to kind of confuse things, to make it
Got to use those mules.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
And do it efficiently. It's really amazing. So scary though. Scary how efficient
Scott,
it is in the process.
One of the other tools that your company makes happens to be a directional cell phone finder. I imagine one of the use cases for that being like prisons to find cell phones that inmates have, things of that nature. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. A number of years ago, we were approached and asked about that and say, hey, could you guys provide something to combat the problem of contraband cell phones? Oftentimes, cell phones are tied to everything else in prison. What do I mean by that? All bad stuff. They want to get, their alcohol in, they want to get their smokes, their drugs, whatever else. It's tied to a cell phone. So if you can get a cell phone, it gives you the power to do anything with a prison, as well as intimidate witnesses. You want to do a hit, you want to do anything, you just got to get a cell phone. That's the key. So we developed an engine, a cell phone detection engine. And what we're doing there is we're looking at the RF signal energy that's coming in. And what we've learned over time, how long do you dwell? How quick do you have to shift the synthesizers and switch for the particular bands and frequencies, and where to look and where not to look. So we filter out specific things that are outside of the licensed bands of the carriers. And that's what's important. So we're doing that still for 3G a little bit, even though there's not much 3G because that's sunset, but for 4G and then 5G, it's called non-millimeter wave stuff. We don't do the real high band stuff because that's from point to point between tower, but 4G, 5G, that's really where all the action is right now for cell phones in the United States and pretty much abroad. So what we'll do is we constantly scan X number of times per second to see if we see a real strong signal appear. And then what we'll do is with our algorithms, use that to actually display on the screen, basically like a bar that goes up and down as you get closer to your target, and sound that will change as you get closer. It goes from beep, beep to beep, 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 beep as you move in. And then we have covert modes and silent modes, so on and so forth. But we really want to do is isolate it down to a cell in a prison in particular, so then they can go in and extract the prisoners and pull the cell phones out. In many cases, they're hidden in particularly weird spots. They have ways of hiding them in walls. They hide them in mattresses and any type of electrical apparatuses where they'll try to blend the chargers in. But the more gross part, and I don't know if I could say it here, I guess I'd just say it.
Tell the story.
I will.
Any body orifice that you can put in your mind and envision, be it a man or a woman, is where they hide cell phones, chargers, the actual SIM cards. They I forget what the term is, but they take a knife and they cut the inside of their mouth and they make a pocket, and that's where they will stick the SIM card underneath in their groin area in their underwear. They make pockets to hold the batteries. And there's a whole commerce, a value system of what cell phones are worth in prison. So it's really important for people to have cell phones and have access to communications. And we kind of ruin that. So we have one covert product called the Pocket Hound. We've been making for over 10 years. In fact, we just got an order from one prison system in the United States for a little more than 600 units alone. They're actually equipping every single prison guard with our Pocket Hound. It fits in your pocket, and it simply vibrates, and you glance down, and it gives you a signal strength in LEDs. So you could still walk around your patrol without holding equipment or anything else, and you move in, and your signal strength in proportion to the transmitting signal. Now, again, the phone has to be transmitting, and most of the time they're in their cell, they're texting away, they're phoning a friend, they're calling their buddy outside of prison, and that's when they get nailed. We've done a lot of cool things too, and some of it we could talk about, some we probably can't. But one that became public, so I could talk about it now, we actually took the Motorola radios that all the guards use, and we gutted them. So we used the existing battery, we integrated a cell phone, and then as you would turn to different bands, frequencies on your actual radio, it would vibrate proportional to where you were from the cell phone. So you would actually walk up, just with your radio as normal, and you would find out that somebody a foot or two away from you with their back turned is on their cell phone texting, and they were nailing people that way. So yeah, a lot of fun things that we were involved in with the cell phone detection in prisons. And we do it on a state, county, and federal level, to the point where they actually tested our product, and they do simulated body, and they stick it in the orifice and all these other nasty things to see how signals propagate through what's closest to human flesh and how well cell phone detectors work. And we had great success, and they recommended our product, the Pocket Hound. Another one is the Wolfhound Pro, which was coupled to a 9 dBi directional antenna. So now you can actually aim, and that's typically used if you're in the tower or you're used in a common area, or drones are flying over dropping cell phones, or they tie them to cats or throw them in basketballs, all these weird ways to get the phones in. They would use our tool to direction find and say, hey, over there on the north gate, we just detected energy. Because again, even though the phones are not actively transmitting, they will autonomously register to the cell tower, and we'll pick up on that ping, which is, it could be every 30 seconds, every couple minutes. And that's what they're looking at. They want to see that ping, and that's when they know when to go in and nail it and find the phone.
Do you have a way of differentiating between different phones? Let's say there's a handful in a single area.
Yeah, we actually do. An interesting question. That's a really good question. In fact, one of the special investigative groups said, hey, Scott, we have a need to, you guys often focus on the strongest signal always. And we know based upon, the frequency, hey, it's 700 megahertz in this area. We know it's AT&T, 4G LTE, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but we actually know it's a bad guy, and he's using something here at the 1800 megahertz. And we want to look at that frequency instead. So can you put an ignore button in, basically? Ignore this one, and we want to focus in just on this one. And we said, sure. And we do that. And that's used in that scenario, not as much in prisons, honestly, but more when they're trying to get bad drug guys, cartel guys and other things. And they're using the Stingray, and they're listening in and following. They're moving in. They get close. And now you've got equipment and a van with engineers. And they're like, I'm not getting any closer. They'll say, give me the Wolfhound Pro. We know the frequency. We know the proximity. Go. Skip this one. That's it right there. Okay, only look at this, discriminate, ignore everything else, and hone in on this one until we find the door. And then the good guys go and they kick it in, do whatever they got to do. So we get involved in a lot of those type of scenarios, which I think is kind of interesting. It was neat. I saw it on Chicago PD we were on, and they kind of featured our unit. They bought it from us. We didn't even know it. And they had them watch them one night. I'm like, holy cow, there's our Wolfhound Pro. And they're using it out in the field. And what's the other jail show? Orange is the New Black or something like that. It was featured on that. A couple other crime shows that our tools end up on, which is sometimes they're used accurately and sometimes they're way off, let's just say. It really depends, but makes for good TV, I think. That's for sure.
That's a good explanation for that use case, but I'm more thinking like, let's say you've got 3 cell phones in a stack.
Okay.
Do you have a way to distinguish which one is which? Or are you just seeing the frequencies?
We are, and to answer your question, for that tool, we're not diving into IMSIs and things like that. We're actually, we're not demodulating information that would require us to be on this side of the law. Can we do it? Sure. Have we done stuff like that? Yeah, but that's not what we're doing with these tools, because these are lower cost tools in the several $1,000s range.
Gotcha.
We have worked on, a lot of research and development and tools to actually work with law enforcement to catch drug cartels in South America. But it was a long time ago. Most of that was the guys that were doing the tumblers for ESNs and IMSI grabbers and things like that. Honestly, though, those days were much easier because cellular, we actually, our black box, we could listen to multiple people, and we would listen to both forward and reverse, and automatically started the tape recorders, recorded it. And we even had some fun way back. We would actually call them up. We'd get so annoyed, and we'd wait, they'd do it. They would tumble the numbers, the ESM, and say, let's have some fun. Let's call this guy. And we'd say, hey, we know what you're doing. You better stop. We're working with law enforcement. They'd hang up real quick and get pissed, and we'd call them back a minute later. And
back in the GSM LTE days.
yeah. A lot of fun, though. A lot of interesting stories and things that came out with that. For us, the part that I didn't realize, and this is the business side that you learn quickly, we would sell, a lot, a couple $100,000 worth of these test tools, these black boxes. And these were Title III lawful agencies that would buy them, work with other governments in Brazil and Venezuela and other countries like that to catch up drug cartel. Every time there'd be a coup, they would take all the equipment and they'd line it up, and then they would drive a truck over it and destroy it all. I'd be like, oh no, we just spent 6 months developing all this technology and tools and stuff. And then our contact would say, don't worry about it. We're sending you a new purchase order. We're going to build it all again for the next government regime. I'd be like, oh, this is crazy. So it's very lucrative, but I don't know how effective it always was, if you know what I mean.
Speaking of,
we have a question from Dragmeyer here. Are officers not allowed to carry cell phones? And also, is there a difference between a phone and a mobile hotspot from the Wolfhound perspective?
Oh, yeah. And this is, in the question, if I understood right, is, are correction officers not allowed to carry cell phones? Yeah, correction officers are not allowed to carry cell phones. I was in a prison a couple years ago, maximum facility, And there was suspicion that the correction officers were bringing in their cell phones. And they asked me, would you take the Wolfhound Pro and do us a favor and walk down these certain corridors for look for cell phones? And I was walking around. I said, no activity, no activity. And they said, would you go in there? And I said, oh, okay, what's that? And they said, oh, that's the lunchroom. It's okay. It's just the correction office. I went in there, lit up like a Christmas tree. I said, there's a ton of cell phones in there. And they're like, all right, come on out. We knew that. And that's okay. Part of the problem is, and I don't want to make a general statement and don't want to offend anyone that is a corrections officer, because they have hard work. They do a great job. There's a percentage of them that are extremely corrupt. I had a meeting at one of the maximum facility in New Jersey, and I presented to about 20 senior people there for the investigative group. The warden showed up and so on and so forth, his whole crew, and said, here's our tools, here's how you can combat the problem, blah, blah, blah. And spent about a couple hours with them. They said, thank you very much. We got purchase orders. They bought a ton of equipment. A few months later, I get a knock on the door from the Department of Commerce and saying, hey, we need to talk to you. You sold this equipment to blah, 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 blah. Did you not? I said, yeah. And they said, okay, we're doing an investigative piece on this. I said, well, what's going on? I said, they're trying to get contraband cell phones out. And they said, no. These corrupt individuals were using your tool, and they would say, you either pay me up or I'm going to catch you with this tool. And all those people are now behind bars. And I was like, oh, geez. So the corruption, the amount of corruption in corrections oftentimes is far more than you or I would ever realize. The other challenge is, if you're familiar with inmate phones, they have usually, 10, 20, 50 phones on the wall. There's often a deal that happens, and they'll charge anywhere from $3 to $6 per minute, collect call to call your loved one. Now imagine Johnny in prison calls his mom and she gets a bill for $100. They control it. So what do prisons want to do? They want to get the mobile phones out so Johnny can't call his mom, drive the revenue to the fixed phone. So we get a ton of business from the companies that provide the fixed phone service. And what they do is they have I'll call it a friendly kickback. They split the commission with the particular place, and it's millions of dollars per month that the correction facility will be able to receive from that split commission from the revenue generated from those fixed phone lines. If that's a safe way to say it without saying any more specific. So if you get the sense, there's levels of corruption in prisons that, they want to get the phones out to drive revenue to a certain place, and also for officer safety. And so there's no witness intimidation and no drugs coming in, but they're controlling what's coming in and what's not coming in, and who's talking and who's not talking. And so it's a bigger political problem than I ever realized. So since I've learned about it to that extent, I don't go to prisons anymore. Well, without getting caught, I should say. We try to stay out of it. We sell to somebody who then gets it in there, and hopefully they're doing it for the right reasons. I think most are, and they're getting phones out, and it's keeping people safe and prisoners safe, staff safe. But the level of corruption is a little bit sickening when you see that in comparison to corruption in other areas. They make a lot of the politicians look very honest.
Okay, I've got a question I want to throw at you, because you've mentioned a lot about law enforcement going into prisons and drugs and cartels and so on and so on. Now, this is an idea I've tossed out a couple of times, and I'll be honest with you, most people have laughed at me about it. And Drew, I'd love to get your input on this afterwards. Sure. You sell these products, and the thing is, they go to the government, they go to law enforcement and so on. What about, and I've proposed this before, a small business company, okay, whose job is, we buy tools from you, and we go out on a hire basis. Your mom and pop grocery store, you call me up and you say, hey, listen, we don't want to get dinged by these skimmers. We'll pay you X dollars. You come by twice a week, look for skimmers. And when I started researching this, I found out that there are some companies, including one very large one, that tried to do it internally, and it failed. And they went to an ATM providing company, and the ATM providing company said, this is way too big for us. We can't handle it. So my thought is, would you be willing to work with, or would you think it's ridiculous to work with a small startup business that would eventually go into franchising, that would use your tools on a contractual per client basis to go to your store, go to your retail store, your gas station, your whatever, check for skimmers, get a U-Haul truck, put a little lab in the back of it, drive up to the pump, hit the Bluetooth button, see what's out there, report back, and the client is the actual owner of the store. They pay you. You take that, you keep the skimmers, you do your research, you build heat maps, you resell that data, and you say, you do this on a civilian level, so to speak, okay? Not for government, not for law enforcement, but Ma and Pa Kettle's, brisket shop.
That's touching on my other question.
Yeah. So do you think that's a viable thing? And as the person who provides the tools, would you work with a company that would do that?
Oh yeah, I mean, your idea, brilliant. I kind of concur, and we talked about it recently. And a few people have even asked us, "Why don't you guys just provide a service? You have the knowledge." And I said, "Well, we're geeks, we're engineers, we're in a lab, we're not field guys." A couple things I did learn in the process is you do need to understand the relationships. If you're talking banks, for example. If you look at the top 10 banks, they don't handle the ATMs or install the paper or maintain the machine or put money in the boxes or anything. That's all subbed out to a third party.
That third party is what I was talking about.
Exactly.
They were approached to do that, and they said, we're too small, we can't do it.
Yeah, and that's the guys that, in my opinion, with proper training could do it, or it could be subbed out to yet a third party that could provide that as an add-on service. And I don't know what the cost is. Hey, each week we're going to come and check most of the guys we deal with, and in my opinion, I think the area where the sweet spot is the credit unions. Why? They stay close to their customers. They're a little bit smaller, but they're big enough to afford security, and they can't afford the black eye. And some of these credit unions have several hundred ATMs that they manage in their locality. So a lot of them that we've been talking to is we go in, we provide training. In fact, we actually developed a skimmer training unit that has one side you slide in the skim scan and there's no skimmer in it. And then next to it is another card reader you slide in that has a skimmer, and just show them here's what it looks like when it lights up and the buzzer goes off, and get the feel for it. And we train the trainers. They in turn now train somebody that maintains the 380 ATMs that they oversee, for example. But is there room for a third party to actually handle that? Absolutely. I actually hired somebody recently with the hopes of providing that type of service locally.
Yes, that's why I wanted to ask Drew about it, because
and of course we work with them, of course.
Service,
yeah,
how do you feel about it?
We're not going to fight against somebody that's going to buy our product and use it in the field. Sure, maybe we'll lose some sales because we're not selling it to all those locations. But if our tool is being used to get skimmers out, we're going to train you or your company, this third party that's going to go in and now offer that service. To me, that's a win. It's such a big market that I don't think any one company can honestly handle it all unless they already have the ability to handle ATMs from coast to coast. There's too many ATMs.
Right. Well, that's why I said
vulnerability.
That's why I said franchising.
Yeah.
Because it's a great franchise opportunity. This is why I was and that's why I was saying, I've mentioned this to people before, but I don't get a whole lot of positive reaction out of it. I get a lot of eye rolling and a lot of, pie in the sky. But I think that it's not only necessary, I think it's very doable. Yeah. And that's why I mentioned I wanted to get Drew's input on it, because I know you're a person who your company trains people and does sort of things like this. What do you think? Do you think it's a viable option?
It's I mean, so what basically what you're talking about is like hiring, a more reduced capability TSCM type thing, right?
Right. But limited to skimmers and such,
Right.
like not like
Yeah.
crawling up into the plenum and running around with white magic wands and stuff.
Yeah, and I don't know the business space dealing with this, right? Like I know the TSCM business space, but I don't know what this business space would look like. So I couldn't give you an answer if this would be a viable, business that could work or could not work. I couldn't give you any input on that. But it could
I
be
think it
something
would
someone
work.
could try.
But the legalese would be interesting.
You would definitely have to have a group that has strong relationships with law enforcement, and if you wanted it to really work, they would have to be able to perform the bulk of the investigation while on site if they find a skimmer, to both offload work from law enforcement, but also to allow the business to be up and going using their whatever it is. Maybe let's just say they have one card processor and you found a skimmer on it. They need to be able to get that going back up as fast as possible, because at the end of the day, a business is a business, and if it's not bringing in money, it's losing money. So I think there'd be some legal hurdles there, and there might be some a lot of challenges that would have to be faced. But if those two problems could be solved for, I think it could work out.
Well, in the words of Warren Zevon, lawyers, guns, and money. I mean, that would solve all of these problems. Your average law enforcement, Johnny Law, out there is not going to be going to the gas station to check for skimmers. He's trying to make profits popping people for going 2 miles over the speed limit. And it's easy to make friends with law enforcement if you're doing something that takes a burden off of them. Now, any business whatsoever, whether you're selling horchata on the side of the road or you're selling TVs from Tijuana, there's going to be legal implications. You're going to need a lawyer. But I think that we live in a time now, and it's such a severity that it wouldn't be hard to find that lawyer, and it wouldn't be hard to make that legalese. And it's always easy to do shrink wrap law, and just say, by using our services, you agree to hold us harmless and build your own get out of jail free card. And there you go. I mean, Apple does it all the time, and almost every major company now. I've seen LG monitors that when you plug the monitor in without a computer and you go to setup, it says, please click yes on this disclaimer before you start using this monitor so we can take your information and use it for advertising. So, I mean, in the current situation, there's got to be a lawyer out there whose legs are worn out from ambulance chasing that would dive head first into this and help such a company get off the ground.
I hear you. Let's pivot now. I think Drew had a few questions for Scott.
Yeah. So with the cell phone detection, love what you're doing. Very streamlined, and you're not trying to overcomplicate it, right? I love that approach for sure. Because at least I see a lot of companies that, they're like, oh, we want to, do cell detection, but we also want to do intercept, right? And you brought up Title III, and if folks aren't familiar with Title III, Title III and U.S. Code anyway, dealing with electronic surveillance. So if you just look up Title III electronic surveillance, that give you a quick rundown of what he meant when he said he was working with organizations that have proper Title III or were able to obtain a Title III warrant, which is what's needed when you do interception and when you do actual listening of conversations, right? So the one question I had with this is, with the popularity of SAT communicators now, right? Like the Garmin InReach, are you working on products to detect those as well? Have those hit prisons, right? The prison cell detection in prison is not my forte. My forte in cellular is actually the interception and the back end side of it. But so I don't know that space. So sorry if it's a rudimentary question. But
no, that's okay. No, it's a good question, and I am familiar with the world of TSCM, and we do sell some of our more advanced tools to that space for espionage and so on and so forth, counter espionage. So, but for basic cell phone detection, most of the time the goal to get things in prison is really to get in the smallest phone, the one that doesn't use that much battery, and batteries that are to get in easy, and chargers to get in easy. So the technology is not ramped up where they're using sat phones and other types of things. That being said, can we detect sat phones? Our newest Wolfhound Pro Ultra that we're going to be releasing next year will actually look at the satellite bands and some of the more advanced things that are outside the traditional 4G, 5G type of stuff, because that is being used, as well as not just looking at, and we look at typically the uplink, the mobile to the tower. We're also going to be looking at the local tower and seeing what carriers
Scott? I think Scott.
Did that just
Scott
die?
had a
I thought that was my
connection issue
side.
here.
I was like,
I
oh,
thought it was
snap.
mine too.
Yeah, I was like, oh no!
Hello,
Scott, but it's a
internet
great great spot to have Scott pause that. I like the eyes closed.
All right, yeah.
Great.
Somebody
I'll
screenshot
message
that.
him on LinkedIn and
that's-
ask him
that's-
to rejoin.
Yeah, that's very cool that they're looking at that SAT stuff, though. Yeah, with this technology, they're not trying to decode and demodulate it, which again is very smart, because you can very easily get into that problem with title authority, right? And I didn't realize what title authority was. I knew like Title 10, Title 50, right? That was like, the land that I lived in for a while, was making sure, you stay Title 50 and you don't veer into Title 10. But then I learned like law enforcement had Title 3. And they're like, oh, we got to get a Title 3 warrant for it. Because I was sitting down with some local law enforcement, and I have this cell intercept device. And I was like, yeah, well, okay, you got the cell intercept device. Forget this. Like, let's just go direct. We'll just start popping stuff like on AT&T, or, start getting stuff from Verizon. And they're like, oh yeah, now before we do that, we got to get a Title 3 warrant. And I was like, what is this warrant thing that you have to get? we did not have to get those. So yeah, it was, but that's very cool, because he gets his approach. They get to sidescape or sidestep all that, so it allows basically a greater reach and a greater capability set for, or not capability set, but a greater use of their capability to have more impact, because they don't have to deal with the problem that Harris had to deal with, right? And he was talking about the Stingray, which the Stingray is the older system, right? Everyone knows it as a Stingray. People still call it a Stingray. You have the Hellstorm, which is kind of what it was, the newest system a few years ago. It's just an evolution. It's all by Harris. But Harris stopped selling these units to local law enforcement, because you had a lot of local law enforcement start using these devices, and they just click, we can track them, right? We got a phone, we pulled it out. Once you have two cell intercept devices paired, you can go in, or even with just one, you can go in with what's called a finishing tool, which his tool would be utilized as a finishing tool, and that tells you exactly what apartment building that the cell that you're trying to capture is in, right? So you can really hone in. You usually hide that behind like a clipboard or something, or a leather binder, and you're walking up and down these apartment buildings looking like a salesman, and then you're just finding where that cell phone is. But it's you'd have the problem of local law enforcement, and this was a problem down in Florida, where all this stuff really started to blow up because it got a lot of media attention. Law enforcement just clicking the intercept capability and listening to phone calls or intercepting text messages and passing those along through the network. And they're like, yeah, we're going to stop selling to local law enforcement, federal only now. So,
Drew, what are your thoughts on SS7 and people gaining access who shouldn't have it?
yeah, so I'm familiar with SS7 and SIGTRAN, which is SS7 over SCTP, which is that's what the cellular network uses now, right? So SS7 is a out-of-band controlled channel used in a lot of different networks, but primarily people know it being tied to the cellular communication networks. And you can do a lot of cool things, a lot of attacks that I developed. For my clients who were in that Title 10, Title 50 domain, utilize exploring cell networks through SIGTRAN and being able to pull resources like in the GSM 3G days from the AUC, which is the authentication server, and stuff like that. If you in the early days of ChatGPT, if you asked it, "Hey, give me the commands I need to run on AT&T's network to pull, KI keys from the AUC using SS7," it would be very restricted. It would be like, "Nope, can't give you anything about SS7." That's big no. So you'd have to find things about that. But yeah, it was. I mean, it's exploited all the time. Cell carriers are using like micro segmentation to protect against it. And they've been doing that for a while now. They're trying to get better and stuff like that. But yeah, it's it will continue to be a problem on the until a few things are changed and adopted. And it's a lot better now on the defensive side than it was back when I was heavy into the research, but it's still a big problem that affect carriers and stuff like that.
The thing I've noticed about that, you talk about the tools, the stingrays, and we sell this to law enforcement and so on and so on. But, it's not unusual to go on eBay and find a complete Celebrite system for sale for a couple $100.
Yeah, but you're not finding a hailstorm system for
no.
So like the closest that you'll find the antennas, right? Like the lumberjack. And in fact, I have a lumberjack system that I bought off of eBay and I use as a fridge magnet now, just as a joke, because the people that know what it is. And that was kind of during my time period of cellular exploitation and tracking. But yeah, you can find Celebrite and stuff like that. But Celebrite, the usefulness of a Celebrite system is not as useful as many people think it might be. The versions that you're seeing on eBay are usually what they call the carrier versions, right? You're not seeing the FBI randomly drop one of their Celebrite units, which will have different capability sets and stuff like that. Now, Celebrite also does an okay job with controlling. I say okay loosely, controlling, who gets access to their top tier stuff versus their non-tiered stuff, right? But
Cisco tries to do the same thing and they fail miserably.
uh,
There's plenty
yeah.
of websites where you can go and get Cisco images for the stuff you just bought at the flea market.
Definitely.
But I understand that they're trying to, but there's also the good old hacker spirit. You buy a Celebrite system. I'm no expert on it, so please don't think that I'm trying to say that. But how hard is it to get an image, burn an image, or flip a bit somewhere, or stick a soldering iron in it, and all of a sudden you have 10 more capabilities? I remember my first FT50, my first Yaesu FT50. I took a soldering iron to it, went here and there, and next thing you know, I can transmit on any frequency I like. And recently, I showed the folks here at the show, you can go onto eBay and buy an EAS encoder for like $400. And it's like there's something to be said for keeping things quiet and private, but we have to be realistic. The stuff is out there.
Yes. So in the space when it comes to like tools development and stuff like that, it is out there. It definitely is. But that doesn't mean you should always make it freely available, right? Like
It's like responsible disclosure.
Right. No, I understand that. I'm just saying that all of the effort you make in that, and you can still go on eBay and buy, naughty toys.
Oh yeah, of course, right.
Everyone here, I'm sure everyone here knows that the holy grail of hacking is physical access. If I can drop $400, I can go collect soda cans and not return movies and come up with $400. Get an EAS encoder and tell everybody that the aliens are coming down, and watch that light up the system. In the older days of the EBS system, the same thing. So I think that we need to keep in mind that there's always going to be a risk factor for the tools we are using legitimately to show up illegitimately. And they will fall into the wrong hands, and they'll fall into the hands of people who have nothing better to do but drink Mountain Dew and watch porn while they tear your little device apart and use it for nefarious purposes.
That's a common story. How did you get it? It fell off the back of a truck.
Right. Or even better, a company goes out of business. I mean, I bought a half dozen credit card terminals to play with for $10. I went to a store that was going out of business, and I'm like, I want that, I want that, I want that, and I want that, and they go $10. In my pocket it went. You can buy entire POS systems on Facebook Market. You can get an entire POS system. You can go on to Amazon for $9 and get a card reader writer.
Yeah,
It's true, but at the end of the day, the companies do their best to keep it out of the hands of those people, and it's still eventually, we all know eventually people are going to figure it out. But I think it's very much like responsible disclosure, where we give them as much time as we can and let people get as protected as they can against the stuff first. So
I think especially Cellbrite to that point. They're an Israeli-based company. They've done pretty good in the hardware space, and they support the carriers, and they support a higher level as well. But they carefully vet that stuff, and it's specific firmware and releases that they're going to get to a select few clients, and they got to be careful because that's their reputation. So I think overall they do a pretty good job, as most people do. We ourselves have had to be careful. We sell a lot of tools to certain companies. What they in turn, where they send that and use that for, could be misused easily. So we try to keep a careful documentation trail.
Yeah, you mentioned
and look at NSO Group. I mean, their tools have been used to take down journalists in countries.
You mentioned Israel. I mean, you want to go to Israel right now and try and sell pagers?
No. Boom.
They're the ones that sell the pagers. You don't.
I know.
That's
if you just go in there and say, "Hey, I've got pagers for sale," you'll be lucky if you make it out of town alive. I realize who did what. I'm just saying that geographically as an example. They were able to corrupt the supply chain to the point of boom, boom, boom.
Right.
So it's like you say best efforts and all this, but I think what you've got the edge on is the education and learning, which never stops. The training never stops. But part of the reason for that is you've got to stay one step ahead of the bad guys, and the bad guys are already 2 steps ahead of you. For every person that goes out and says, "Hey, I just learned how to hack this," there's a dozen people who hacked it and didn't say a thing. They're sitting on it like a 0 day, or they'll sell it to a cartel. There was a time in Costa Rica where if you were a hacker above a certain level, there were cartel people that would set you up for life. They would fly you down to Costa Rica. They put you in a house. They give you anything you'd ever want. Sure, you screw up once and you end up, having your head evacuated by a 9mm. But the thing is, this stuff exists, and we've got to take that into consideration. Just like the gangs that are intimidating people to leave the skimmers in place, just like the guards that are intimidating the prisoners. These things are real, and it's got to not be it's just a compliance issue and compliance sucks and nobody does it and it's useless. You can't just blow things off like that. There's corruption everywhere. I've seen corruption in government that would turn you white. Okay, but and the thing is that it's out there, and you can't deny it, and you can't just let it go, and you have to have a certain amount of fortitude against it. Otherwise, you're going to lose.
Yeah, and you do have to keep in mind there's a percentage of companies that survive these days in technology. I think also advance technology and innovation much quicker. Therefore, by the time hackers, in some cases, they're catching up. Sometimes they're ahead, but usually they're trying to catch up to the technology. and find the vulnerabilities and exploit it. I think for us, we've learned keeping ahead of that curve really does help to keep people from abusing it. It's still going to happen. You're absolutely right. You got to do your best job, and you got to be careful who your customers are. We have a percentage of customers that we turn down because they're suspicious.
I got the same thing when I
Well,
bought
it is.
a ID card printer.
Mhm.
I was doing a legitimate physical pen test contract and all, and I had to practically give them my shoe size and show them my socks before they would sell
Yeah.
a card printer. Now, grant you, once I got the card printer, I made a fake Costco card, I made a fake library card, I made all kinds of stuff that we use in the physical pen test, and it worked beautifully, masterfully. The people who ordered the pen test, they were looking at me like I had three heads. They were just like, how the hell did you do that? And it was actually rudimentarily simple. So I think there's room in this research and development for someone to sit there and just go out to the dark web and go out to eBay and go on these marketplaces, go to the flea markets and, say, hey, this is what's out there. I just found this out there. I just found our product. There's an open air flea market here in Las Vegas. It's way, way, way up in North Las Vegas. It's called Broadacres. And you'll see a lot of people who drive to Mexico, buy projection TVs and technology, stuff like that, and they pay it pennies on the dollar and they come and they sell it at the flea markets. I once got an entire, 4-foot tall bay stack switch for $10, and for an extra 10, he carried it to my car for me.
Yeah.
There's room to keep an eye on this. I think there's a space for this where educating yourself on what they're doing, but also seeing what's actually out there.
There are whole companies that just dedicate themselves to that, though, right? So this is
Oh yeah.
So we have like not just threat intel, right? We have other types of intel that are used, and there are companies who have whole teams that are just dedicated to finding their products in the field and in the wild, right? One of them, I can't name them because they're a client of mine, but they have a whole team where they will find their products online, and they will strategically acquire those products, which is not always by paying for them online, right? So there's a whole group. I mean, yes, there is a place for people to do research. Just focus on that, and it's being done right now by hundreds of thousands of people around the world in all different types of industries. But you hit on like four separate points, right? Like you talked about the pagers. That is what a true nation state level attack looks like, right? And there's many facets into that, and that there's not enough time here for us to go into what actual nation state stuff looks like, right? Everyone talks about, nation states can do this, or this, and it's just like you're limiting.
It's one thing to
you're
talk
limiting
about it.
yourself,
It's
right?
another thing when you've seen it.
That's-
When it
that's-
goes
it's-
across your desk, it's different than talking about it at a 2600 meeting.
Right. It's also different when it was your job to develop the TTPs that were for a nation state level, right? When you're told it doesn't matter if it's illegal, if it doesn't matter how much it costs, we just need it to get done, right? That changes your viewpoint on engineering, right? That changes your viewpoint on what can be done. Can we now get when people talk about nation states, a lot of people talk about these, you teach people how to do all these covert entry stuff. You teach security red teamers, and you teach, our government and other government agencies, all this stuff. What do nation states do? And it's just like, yeah, we just get people hired at the place, right? Like they get a badge, they get a laptop and access to the VPN. Great. I just got all the things I cared about when I'm doing a red team before I start exploring inside, right?
Yeah.
They just gave it to me. But then you also hit on companies, trying to protect this stuff or limiting their sales of items, right? Which is a totally separate domain on something else. And your point kind of just reiterated the importance why companies need to know who their customer is, right? Someone will always do something bad, and this was taught to me at a very young age when I was building tools. That were very offensively focused, it's not the team that you build it for that usually is the person who's going to abuse it. It's the team that finds it after the people you built it for have used it, right? And that doesn't mean that you have to limit yourself or things like that. It just means that you have to know that there's a time limit from every exploit that you develop, from every tooling that you develop for before someone else is going to be using it in a way in which it wasn't designed, or in a way in which that could harm others. And you have to then work on how do you make sure you limit that capability as much as possible so that only certain people can get it, knowing that people will get it. So like if you bought a Sting, let's say we find a legitimate Stingray 2 system on eBay right now. We buy it for $100,000, right? Great. It's going to be useless in the large part because what it does is it throws up a fake 2G cell network, right? So even if we were to buy one today, it wouldn't work. And even if we were to buy a Hailstorm system of 6 years ago, it does a 2G to 4G, it does a 2G downgrade to then a 4G lock on. Well, that's not going to work either because a lot of phones aren't shipping out with 2G radios anymore. So that attack structure doesn't work. So even if people got these tools, right, these tools that are very restricted and they're extremely difficult to find and they cost a ton of money, they're not going to be useful anymore because technology, as Scott was talking about, has progressed so far and so quickly that the attacks and the exploits that were being utilized to do that 2G downgrade, right, doesn't matter anymore because you're not going to downgrade to 2G if there's no 2G radios. So I think it's not so much that we have to be so worried that we can get a Celebrite unit or something like that, right? Which on the government side it does require. It's not like you just get a firmware image, right? There is there are two other pieces to that, which are cryptographically secure. And it's been tested many times. And I'm not saying that there can't be a break for it. I'm just saying it's even advanced individuals are going to have a hard time getting around it. What I am saying is a lot of times when we find very unique items, right? Whether it's, as you were bringing up a Blizzard announcement system or something like that. Truth be told, I mean, we can send flash SMS without having to leave our bedroom, right? Like we can take advantage of the cellular network and do the SMS 0, which is what flash SMS is. And everyone will get an emergency alert on their phone, right? Steve knows this because I used to do that, and I would text people as 911, sending as a flash SMS, and we would just have fun with people in college at that time when we were doing this, right? Steve also knows.
I still have that screenshot.
Yeah, from 911. Yeah,
yeah.
Steve also knows that in college. When we had other funds with cell phones because my job was largely focused on exploiting mobile networks and cellular devices. But even though Steve saw that in person, right, it didn't mean that Steve was able to get that capability from me, right? I carry a Pelican case with me everywhere I went because it was my little research box. But I wasn't like selling it to the masses, right? And it was very controlled and stuff like that. And that's what companies do. And again, to Scott's point, the technology advancing, right? And it's not just now the technology sets, the radios, and when we're dealing with wireless and stuff like that. And that's what we're talking a lot about today. But even the cryptographic technologies, right?
I will say though, you did inspire me to try. You got me to buy a USRP.
Yeah,
Let me give you an example of what I'm concerned about in some of this stuff.
Yeah.
This is just an example, but it's a true story and it's me. Okay. Go back about 20 years ago. Let's see, we're in 2024 now. So no, let's say go back 24 years ago. Okay. I knew absolutely nothing about HID cards, badges, and such. And 9/11 hit. And I was put in charge of the security system for the company I worked for. And I had to learn a crash course in how these cards, access cards went. And I discovered something. I discovered that the UPS guy somehow had gotten a card and was getting in and wandering around the office. So that made me think, if he can get away with that, what else can you do with it? I went down to Canal Street in New York City, I dug around some companies, I dug around some rummage bins, and I came up with a HID reader that was designed for garage doors, like parking garages.
Right. The Maxi Procs.
I slapped a 12-volt battery on it. I put it into an old microphone case that I had, and I slapped a picture of Spider Jerusalem on it that said, "Give me info." And I stuck it in a potted plant outside the door of the company. And at the end of the day, I had collected the badge information off of every person who walked through the door to go into that company. When they pulled their badge out to swipe it, my reader would pick it up and read it. And I got it to the point where it was doing an RS-232 dump to a laptop. And this is in the old days when the laptop was the size of your head, right? Not quite the IBM Luggable, but still pretty big. And I was able to collect this information in real time. I took this to Hope, the Hope Conference, and I presented it. I presented it as the Spider Box. And I got all kinds of weird attention. Here's me, a kid who didn't even know what color wires made sparks yet, right? But I had just captured 30 people's HID card data as they walked past. And fast forward a few years, somebody called me, and next thing you know, my device is on a TV show. Fast forward another couple of years, and you know what we've got? The Proxmark 3.
Oh yeah.
I remember when those things first came out, and the people were coming to me and saying, "How did you do this? How did you do this?" And I showed them this old Shure microphone box with a 12-volt lantern battery and a reader that was taken out of a parking garage. And from that, we now have an entire industry of people, handheld toys from China, Proxmarks, dangerous devices, left, right, and backwards. You don't even have to think to clone a card now. All you got to do is go beep 1, beep 2, done and done.
I will say the Proxmarks suck.
All I'm saying is that it started from somebody who knew absolutely jack shit about the system, who went down to a junkyard, got some spare parts, and the next thing you know, here we are.
I tried to use one of those on an engagement, couldn't get it to work. We pulled out the actual HID reader with, I can't remember the operating system and the firmware that we ran, but we put it in our laptop bag, rolled up and down an elevator, just cloned everybody's cards that way because the Proxmarks just didn't work.
Well, the Proxmarks aren't designed as an infield tool, right? The Proxmark is to write cards in a research tool.
It didn't even do that.
So
it's a
little misuse of the technology.
I had used a similar thing on a pen test, the Tastic RFID Thief, which is similar to what Delchai described. You know, it's a long-range reader meant for a garage. You put a PCB in it, a bunch of D batteries, and you can capture cards. And the issue I ran into was after cloning those cards, that we didn't know what the heck floor each card went to, and the elevator would take you to whatever floor the card was in. So, like, that was a fun experience for me. But these tools, I think the overall issue tends to be that with time, everything's going to become obsolete. So we do our best as professionals to obscure as best we can the information that can be used in the hands of criminals and script kiddies alike, to just give that buffer until it becomes the next greatest thing is out there.
So are you saying I'm a script kiddie or a criminal?
Now I hover in between.
How many beers have you had?
Yes.
I think a lot of it too, when you're designing a product, and we focus on hardcore designs and products, we do create a level of security by obscurity baked into the product. And I think a lot of things, when you tie it into the 3-letter agencies and the products they vet, they do look for a level of that, because you want to have a certain life cycle for a product. So if they're going to vet and recommend your product, and we've gone through this with several of the different agencies, they have their buying groups that will track it down, find it, collect, surveil all the information about it, and talk to the users. They'll buy the products, they'll beat it to crap, then they'll contact you afterwards. And you'll have success when you start selling to these agencies in some reasonable volume, because you did your homework and you made it difficult for the product to be misused, and you made it easy for the user. But you have to also plan that life cycle. I think you can't have this product, the things that we used to hack and fool around with 10, 20 years ago, we don't focus on that these days. Today, the flipper zeros and other things that everybody's focusing on are fun, but they're kind of also exploiting things that have already been done individually. Nobody's taken that and really narrowed it down into one single device. All those things have been done. So they're not necessarily doing anything novel. They're doing it affordably, making it easy to do to the masses. So everybody could be a hacker. And
they make a game out of it.
Knowledge.
The thing you got to remember too is the people that are doing this, they were inspired back in that day by anything that they could get their hands on. And you say it bring it to the masses and makes it easier. That's very true. My first computer came out of a dumpster.
Yep.
Okay, I went and did dumpster diving until I found enough parts to put together my first PC. And why did I do that? Because I watched a movie where a kid took an IMSI 8080 and turned NORAD upside down.
Mm-hmm.
And these people are inspired to do that by these things.
Yeah.
So you can say, oh, well, it's no big deal. It's old stuff. It's old hardware. It's old technology. How many people went onto eBay or down to the local market and bought a video game or a vending machine to try to figure out how the coin operation works? Mm-hmm. And then you discover by some miracle that shekels pass for quarters in most vending machines. Or you find out that ABACABD code doesn't actually work and dispense you a free Coke. But if you pour salt water down the front of it, it'll dispense everything that's in it in one shot.
Voila. Yeah.
You've got these people that are innovators, and they're gonna buy all kinds of stuff that they're not going to be able to use. God knows the amount of money I spent on junk. I bought a vector screen monitor made by a company called Bunker Ramo, and all it ever did was sit in my garage because I could never get it to do anything but hum. But somebody's going to get a hold of something, and they're going to be inspired by this, and they're not going to give up. They're not going to look on eBay and say, well, that's old technology. It's not going to work, and it's not going to be any good. They're going to say, well, what can I do with it?
Can I add something? So
Please do.
The flipper, it has a lot of utility. It doesn't say it does everything great. It says it does a lot of things well, not everything perfectly. It's not trying to be everything. But what it is a low-cost solution for someone like me who's newer to the industry than y'all to get my hands on stuff and then start developing with multiple functionalities. Like, I've written several custom flipper applications. I am a huge fan of my flipper. His name is Jones, and if you get that reference, you're awesome. Yeah. Flipper named Jones, you get it? Dolphin. Yep. Okay.
I've actually I got a stuffed Jones sitting here right above my
Thank God someone got it. But the thing is, on their own, not only would this be a lot of expensive equipment, but it's not integrated together automatically. It's a lot to carry. It's a lot to have on me. It's a lot to get through TSA to go to DEF CON. Or I can have this little pocket device. And as I got better, as I got more into the industry, as I got more money, yes, I bought the real stuff.
Yeah.
But I still use my flipper 9 times out of 10 because it does the job 9 times out of 10.
Yeah, and you can just throw it in your pocket.
Yeah. And addition, those special applications I wrote, they work on the flipper. They don't work on this other hardware. Like, I wrote a camera jammer. It takes advantage of the FCC putting blatantly out there what frequencies these cameras work on and what they broadcast on it, and camera starts acting real funny. That works on the flipper. Doesn't work on anything else. It requires 2 of the flipper's functionalities, meaning I would have to integrate these 2 other pieces of hardware over here, or I could write one neat application. And sometimes just having everything in a one-stop shop really does make development easier.
No,
you know what I have in front of me? You're going to laugh at this, but I wish I had a camera here to show this to you. I've actually got a CPM 700 that I got for $100 at a swap meet.
Sick.
I don't know if you're familiar with the CPM 700. It's a really basic piece of TSCM gear. It's put out by a company called REI, Research Institute Incorporated. Mm-hmm. It's meant for bug sniffing, wiretap sniffing. It does a little bit of, I think, not this unit, but there is one that does do some demodulation. And this is the toy that you used to use to go around and sniff bugs in people's houses or in their cars or whatever. It sits right here and it intimidates people. But I mean, it's old technology, but they still sell it for $10,000 online. I got it for $100 at a swap meet.
Yeah, and a lot of the newer bugs, I don't think operate the way they used to work either, though. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So if you really dig into the technology, again, that's what we were talking about, and Drew touched on it too. The advances in technology, and REI is a great company. We've talked to them. We see them at a lot of different conferences and stuff. They keep evolving their technology to deal with the more common threats. Most of the modern bugs are what I call silent bugs. They're sitting there quietly, and they can commandeer them later on and turn them on almost like a IoT bot that just performs a DDoS attack or something like that. So they're quiet until they need them.
If you live in a urban environment, you've got a spy store.
Yeah, everywhere.
We used to have at least 3 of them here in Vegas. One of them at least has gone out of business. And you go in there thinking, you go in there whistling the James Bond theme, and you see those advanced bugs for $10,000, $20,000, $5,000. Oh, but I'll sell you this old one for $50. Mm-hmm. And people don't know any better. But the thing is, they're still out there. You can still do things. I mean, God, remember what we did with baby monitors? Remember when we had cordless phones that could attach to somebody else's base station because they were all analog? It's like we can have a lot of fun with the stuff you throw away.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And if you look at the modern threats, though, I think the guys that are doing true espionage and state against state and stuff, most of the time they're not using the old technology at all. So you really need advanced, not just TSCM tools. It's the knowledge is the other missing link, I think.
That's why
is very important. It's not just saying, hey, I've got this, Oscar Green or this box or that box.
Oh, God.
It's having the knowledge to use it is just as important, I feel.
I would sell my left nut for an Oscar Green.
You want the Oscar blue, though.
I know you want the blue, but I mean, I
the new one that's coming out.
I said 1 nut, not 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Oscar Blue is no longer ITAR, so it can be purchased more wide range. But what you really want to detect some of like these silent bugs, as Scott put it, is a nonlinear junction detector, right? So
REI sells those too.
They do, yeah.
The thing is that I got these things because I wanted the knowledge and the education. I didn't want to be a bad guy. I wanted to be a good guy. I've always used my superpowers for good. But the thing is that I couldn't afford $50,000 classes. But you know what? I could afford $100 down at the swap meet. Yeah. And, I could find the books that people threw out. And it's people like that are going to be the challenge for your new bugs and your new things. And, you're talking nation, state, and federal and all this, but there's a whole nother ball game. There's the guy who just wants to F with somebody. Okay? Do you remember when there was a video for 2600 where they took a cross repeater radio and they took the output from Burger King's remote ordering system and fed it to McDonald's and vice versa. So you go up to Burger King and you say, I want a Whopper. And the guy at McDonald's said, hey, this is McDonald's. And you're sitting in the car laughing your ass off. Hotels out here in Vegas are notoriously cheap. They go to Walmart and they buy FRS radios and give them to their cleaning staff. The same thing you're supposed to use when you go hiking, right? So I sit here and I pick up an FRS radio and I call, hey, we've got a dead body in room 210. Who's going to clean it up? And you listen to everybody scream at each other over who's going to go clean it up. These are the people.
That's some good trolling there.
I used to use a thing called I Love My Neighbors as a man-in-the-middle Wi-Fi attack. So I would broadcast things. And what it would do, it would take all your Google requests and feed it through Bing.
That's horrible.
Thing is, there are people out there whose thirst for knowledge outweighs their financial ability. And they're not going to be nation-state attackers. They're not going to be that. But they're going to be the people rummaging through your dumpster, trying to learn, watching videos on YouTube, buying a flipper, putting an extra 2 wires together to see what happens, taking a drone and flying it over your house with a Wi-Fi access point on it. The thing is, these things are just as real and just as important as the nation state, federal, state. And it's great to focus on that. It's a great profit center. But don't forget the little guy. Don't forget Ma and Pa Kettle in their grocery store. Don't forget, the people who are going to walk up behind you and scan the cards in your wallet. I think they deserve some attention too, and they deserve some protection.
But they don't. You don't need to fear these people. You just need to hire them, right?
Speaking of,
well, you know what? Funny you should mention that. I know there's one person here who would jump on that bandwagon pretty quickly.
Like, for real, I need to feed Jones, guys. You don't understand. He has an addiction and it needs to be fed.
I understand the Chaos Goblin or Gremlin, for hire now.
Yeah, I'm a gremlin, not a goblin. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
I know how to clean.
I misspoke on that one.
I'm only bad after midnight, so not during office hours.
And like it says in my title here, Skod, the Norse god of information security, who keeps our firewalls safe. So we're not all gremlins.
No, just
part-time gremlin.
No.
I had to mute myself to hide my evil laughter earlier. I'm sorry.
Well, as Tim Simon said, that I'll be bad for good.
For goodness sake.
When it comes to where you see, obviously we're talking a lot of stuff about cellular. We talked about skimmers. With the talking, bringing in Flipper into this, right? And I know. We talked about Flipper added no new capabilities, just added people who weren't, educated in the RF space to be able to do things now in the RF space. I have not seen any federal indictments where a Flipper has actually been used in any major crime. Have you? And you work closer with more closely with local law enforcement and stuff like that. What are the concerns that you've heard about, the Flipper and whatnot from their perspective?
Oh, I've got one good one for you. Gas station systems that somehow, for some reason, which escapes any wisdom I can come up with, tie in the price that goes up on the electronic sign on the side of the road with the price at the gas pump, and people using flippers to change the price of gas down to like $1 a gallon.
Do you have? But has there been a conviction on that? Has there
Not
been?
that I'm aware of, and that's I think that's coming because
It only changes the sign, though. It doesn't change. The actual gas.
Well, there was talk about it.
666, I swear. I have not done that.
I can't confirm it. I cannot put my hand on the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy and say that it's true, but I have heard that there are systems where you can do this, that you can use Bluetooth controls and other things to change the price on gas. And I read some news articles that said that it had happened. Now, again, no proof. I'm not saying it's proof. I'm not saying it's proven. But boy, if that starts happening on a larger scale, the feds are notoriously late to the gate when it comes to making law and enforcing law and getting these indictments, because a lot of these people, and God bless the feds, but sometimes they're still in the Atari 2600 era.
What's wrong with the Atari 2600?
I've talked to people at what's the FBI's little powwow group there, Infraguard. And a lot of those people couldn't find their ass with both hands and a hunting dog. Okay, but the thing is that there are people who are sharp, but then the lawmakers come in, and you've got Senator Bofo, who can't even use the remote on his TV. If it wasn't for the fact that we've gone all digital, he'd still have a blinking 12 on his VCR. And you want that guy to make law and to do indictments?
Well,
we're not there yet.
Lawmakers don't do indictments.
Infraguard,
right?
though, what's the purpose of it? Infraguard is really taking private and public and bringing them together. It's really FBI reaching out and saying, hey, we realize that there are groups out there that have knowledge beyond our capabilities. Let's work together and share that information. So to me, that's smart. That's being humble. They're saying, hey, we can't do this alone, guys. We need the community out there, be it the hackers, be it the technology companies. Let's work together to beat the bad guys. That's finally something from a government side that's actually good. So I applaud that and I support that. And we're members of it. We're working with them. And I I speak at their shows. I've learned a lot, and yeah, they're not all the experts there, but that's okay. They don't have to be. But when they bring in other experts in different niches, I think that's great. That's really what it should be. I think with the Flipper Zero, to your point, it's easy to interfere and mess with something that's basically changing a price. They're not really getting into the actual ecosystem of the financial side where they're tampering with it. And I think that's where Flipper Zero, a lot of the stories in the media get blown out of proportion.
Well, that's the job of the media. That's the job of the
media
media to do that.
Yeah, they're terrible with that. They really misrepresent things often. I often give an analogy. Have you ever heard of anybody compromising Apple Pay?
Have you ever heard of the story of Kevin Mitnick? And they said that he could whistle into a phone and launch nuclear missiles?
Yeah.
The government inherently is ass backwards when it comes to technology. You and I and the rest of us here, we are leaps and bounds ahead of them. I'm a disciple of Ray Semko, okay, the Dice Man. I have been to his lectures. I've sat and talked with him. I've read his books. I've written things inspired by what he said. And I realized this early on, that when I went to Intragard and the FBI says, wow, you know how to use Wireshark? We'll pay you $22,500 a year. We'll pay you $22 an hour. We'll pay you $50,000 a year to come to Quantico and do that for us. Oh, after you run a 2-minute mile and get shot at, and by the way, we now own your life. It's the government is not going to catch up to the Flipper Zero for a little while yet.
Yeah. Do you guys honestly think, and we could say this because Kevin's not with us anymore, and we all miss him, but do you think he really chirped DTMF tones into the phone that could potentially launch nuclear codes and all that?
No, that was the whole.
But I think he had the ability to social engineer it if he wanted to.
The government inflated that and made that up.
Exactly.
It's totally fake.
Yeah.
Just like when they accused him of stealing the source code. And he went, oh, you mean this source code here that you can get for free by writing to these people? I didn't steal anything.
Yeah.
I thought my whole point there was the government, if they can't nail you for something, you'll make something up.
Exactly. They're going to twist it because Kevin's a brilliant guy and he could social engineer probably better than all of us can, I think.
The best social engineer, although he's the biggest for me, is the guy who used to run Larez Consulting. God, I can't think of his name now.
Chris Nickerson.
Nickerson. Yep.
He is the absolute best social engineer I've ever seen, ever. Not the sort of person for a heart-to-heart conversation, but if you need to social engineer somebody, Fuemo. Yeah. When MGM got hit, because somebody called up and said, hey, I'm so-and-so, change my password, Nickerson was the first person I thought of. I'm like, he warned us about that 20 years ago. He's an amazing social engineer.
If anybody wants an example, True TV, look at Tiger Team. That's Nickerson's.
That's the TV show that used the Spider Box.
Yep.
The hit card reader.
Yeah. Another summer column alumni, Chris Nickerson there.
Mm-hmm.
Dude.
Yeah.
He got me into some cool stuff at DEF CON. Just as I was volunteering at SummerCon. Really good guy. Scott, I have a few questions for you about your books here.
Yeah.
So how does your personal experience of being hacked inform the content and advice that's presented in that first book of yours, Hacked Again?
Well, to be honest, I was educating people, talking to people how to stay safe in a general arena from cybersecurity at the time. So honestly, when I got a phone call, I was actually in New York City. I was doing a Bloomberg interview. I finished up. I got off. I'll never forget. I went to a local establishment there and had a martini just to chill. And I got a phone call from Associated Press, and they said, geez, are you Scott Schober? You're running Berkeley Varitronics. We heard your company was compromised with a hack. Is that true? Would you like to go on the record? Because we're doing a full, investigative piece on it. I said, geez, who told you that? And they're like, well, we can't really tell you, but we have our sources and we believe it's true. Could you confirm it? And can we interview you? And I said, all right, I really don't want to because it's embarrassing as heck. Here's a wireless company, cybersecurity. We're educating people how to stay safe. And here we are victims of it. But you know what? If you let me share with people the things that I did wrong, my misfortunes, what I learned from it, so they don't go down that same path I went.
That's
All right, I'll put it out there. Maybe it'll hurt business a little bit. It's a little bit embarrassing. I got some egg on my face, but I'll do it. And I just took basically what was up here. It took me 2 years to write a book. I'm not a writer. I say I suck at writing because was never good at that. When I had one course in college that was creative writing. I walked in the room and I was scared to death because this professor that was a writer for 40 years, was an expert and everything else. And the class was about 30 women in it and me. And I walk in, I'm like, oh, great. These are all writers. They know what they're doing. And he came over to me and he said, Scott, they're using computers in this class. I don't know anything about computers, but I know writing. I said, guess what, professor? I know computers, but I don't know anything about writing. We'll work together. He goes, you take care of the girls, keep them happy, show them how to use the computers. You're going to ace my course. And I did. I learned a little bit about writing in the process, but it's not easy. It's a different gift. So I had to learn the hard way. I self-published. How do you publish a book? And I did soft cover, hardcover, ebook, audio book, the whole gamut for 3 books. And now working on the 4th book is Stolen Plastic. And it's just sharing stories, being honest and sharing stories and just speaking. And I learned in the process, if you share a story and people learn from it and it helps them, they'll make a connection. Once they make that connection and they learn from it, they'll come back and hopefully you'll be rewarded with book sales. Although honestly, the goal is not to sell books. That's a process that happened. What I learned in the process, that's the more beneficial part than selling books, is you have credibility. You get called by TV networks. You get on great shows like this. You can get hired and get paid handsomely to speak in front of audiences. As long as you know a little bit more than everybody else, you're doing okay. But you got to keep learning and keep teaching yourself and refine the craft of writing. And as I did that, I got better. The 2nd book was about 9 months. The 3rd book took about 6 months. And we'll see about the 4th book here, how long it takes. But I think it's learning about how you can help other people. It's not, everybody thinks you write a book and you're a millionaire. That's far from the reality. It has nothing to do with any of that. And if you do it for an ego or do it for fame and fortune, you're probably going to fail miserably. I met so many people that said they wrote a book on whatever and they never sold any and don't understand why. I think you're doing it for the wrong reasons. You got to really share information. And just like, I think what I love about the hacking community and a lot of these events and shows that I go to, a lot of it's sharing knowledge and information. Writing a blog, writing a book, doing a podcast. These are just other avenues for doing the same thing. So if you feel like you have a gift inside you, or you have knowledge, or you have stories, I tell everybody, write a book. Do it. You've got nothing to lose. And you'll probably learn more about yourself in the process than anything else. And that's what you walk away with. You say, wow. Now, yeah, you're going to have a business card. You can tell people, hey, I wrote this book and that book and that book. And you can give them to people as gifts and feel good about yourself and all. But I think it's when people say, Scott, I read this chapter about passwords. I never really understood the importance of a strong password, or why I shouldn't reuse it, or why I shouldn't put in the high school that I went to in my security challenge question. When they have these little revelations and they're applying it for practical best practices in their life, that gets you excited. That says, okay, for that person, I helped them become a little bit safer and prevented them from getting hacked or compromised. And I think you empower them a little bit. And I think that's important. And that was my goal in senior cyber. I was so frustrated. I looked out there for books that could help seniors. And I didn't see a whole lot that didn't talk disparagingly to seniors or talk down to them like they didn't have knowledge or capability. And I tried to relate that in things of the past that they learned how to do, like learn a rotary phone. Most of us say, what's a rotary phone? But to them, that was cutting edge. Or, when they had the first TV on the block, maybe that technology to them got them excited and they were engrossed in it. Same thing like today, you grab a smartphone, and my kids are honestly better at it than I am. And geez, I'm in the business, but they have a knack for it. That's amazing. So I think when you can relay stories and help people appreciate that they don't have to be nervous to get on the internet or use a computer or use a smart device, you empower them. And that really helps them. So if you've got that ability and time, because it does take time to write a book, do it. I encourage all of you, write a book. If anybody's got some stories to tell, you'll learn more about yourself than you can ever believe. It's really cool.
That's kind of the whole point behind having a podcast too, is
Exactly.
helping people.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you a lighthearted question real quick. When was your first DEF CON?
Oh, geez. I don't know. A couple of years ago, I guess.
Oh, man, I'm hitting year 14 this year.
Wow.
That's because you're old, Steve.
Yeah.
Yes,
So do you still have your liver?
barely.
Barely.
How about your kidneys?
No. Only one of them got lost in that bathtub.
What has been your favorite book to write?
Whew.
The one that only took 6 months because it only took. No.
I think the learning process of Hacked Again fascinated me because, again, it took me 2 years, but I learned. I spent so many weekends and late nights because I had 2 young kids at the time. They'd go to bed. My wife and I would get them down. My wife would go to bed. Then I would start writing, and I would find myself sometimes just writing through the night. I reminisce the days when I was back in, because I was big into computers, the Atari. I had every Atari known to man and the Apple II, and I was computer president of a computer club in my school. So I just coded. That was all I wanted to do, was write games and play and hack games and stuff like that. I was addicted to that, where I just would stop sleeping, which wasn't healthy, but I got a similar buzz when I started writing, where I'd look at the clock and I'm like, oh my gosh, I stayed up the whole night. I didn't go to bed and I'm still writing, but I can't stop. I got something up here. I got to get out. So one tip I learned from somebody who wrote actually 185 books, he helped me. He said, get speech to text. He goes, your mind thinks much faster than you can type. You're going to find your typing, correcting, backing up, editing will tie you up, and which prevents people from writing books. Just put your phone on, record, talking to a mic, whatever, do speech to text, and just do that. And you'll find how much easier it is. And then go back and clean it up and edit it and get smart people that know how to put the periods and commas where they belong and all that stuff. And I tried it and I said, oh my gosh, I can tell stories. I can talk because it's in here and I can relate that. So once I started to learn that process, it really refined the writing. I wasn't worried about this. I was worried about thinking. So then I found I was writing my book in my head, not on the computer. In other words, I'm in the shower, I'm in the car, I'm thinking, oh, that's a good idea. That's a story. This happened when I had my identity compromised. I got to jot this down. And I just start talking. And suddenly you talk for a half hour, edit, clean it up later. And now it's actually interesting. And people want to read that because they're getting the little gems, hopefully, out of that, the mistakes you made, what you learned, how to protect yourself. So use those type of things to craft writing. In answer to your question, I still think it's probably Hacked Again was my favorite book to write. And it was my least favorite to write at the same time because it took 2 years of my life away.
So TLDR, brain dump, edit it later.
Yeah.
And then in a similar vein,
That's probably pretty good advice.
Go
ahead, Drew.
What made you? Why did you choose the path of the dark arts of RF for your career ambitions? Right.
Our background as a company, and my father, I got to give him credit. He's a self-taught engineer. He's kind of a true hacker that, out of curiosity and research and learning, taught him everything he knew. He founded the company 52 years ago. Late at night, he'd be in the basement in the lab working and tinkering with electronics and software, and always surrounded himself by smart people and acquired several businesses over time and did very successful. I think when I look back at some of the things he did, he, back in the mid 1980s, connected with a company in Washington, D.C., and had the forethought to say the industry needed test equipment to build what is known as a cell tower before any of us knew what a cell tower really was. Yet they talked about these big giant phones. Nobody knew how they would actually communicate and work on a global standpoint. So really, the test tools that we built, and we've got some of them in our conference room / museum, took us to where we are today. And that was really the early genesis of radio frequency, the true cellular frequencies, amps and e-amps back in the early days in the late 80s. We built transceivers, stimulus transmitters, and wrote propagation analysis software to make mobile phones actually work. And to me, I started in 6th grade in this company, fixing keypads, learning how to solder, what's a cap, what's a resistor.
That's how I grew up. So I have to ask, was your dad
Yeah.
a ham radio operator?
Yeah, actually he is. My father is a ham radio operator. My grandfather, he passed away at 99 a number of years ago, was actually a well-known ham operator around the world. You know how they...
So was mine.
Oh, yeah, he probably knows yours then. They have those, what is it? Is it QRL
QSL cards.
Yeah, he obtained more of those, had some record, and communicated to people in NASA and all this other fascinating stories. But in fact, I just got a call from a relative that asked if I could join a board to work with ham operators and the public safety network, because we know people in the public safety.
Mhm.
He knows ham operators, and he goes,
I
"You
work
do
with
have
similar
your
groups.
ham license, right?" And I was embarrassed to say, "No, I don't. My father does." I said, "I got to go get it. I learned how to code as a kid, but I never took the test, so I got to go take it and become an official amateur operator, I guess."
I'm not going to say it online.
Yeah, don't be embarrassed. I work with commercial radio, right, all the time, and I still don't have my ham license. So
Yeah.
Designed antennas, don't have a ham license. Yeah.
But I do respect the hams, their knowledge base, and growing up with my father and grandfather, I went to the ham fests and the flea markets, and probably we bought more equipment and everything from teletypes to computers that you could fill museums with, I think. It's
And then a bunch of
unbelievable.
crap that you think you're going to use, but you end up not using.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think the fact, when I was a young teenager, my brother and my dad was working at Atari Research Labs as the VP in New York City. I mean, it was like a dream come true. We had every single game console. We actually had the privilege of going in and testing all the games. So they'd pay us with pizza and all the arcade games that we could play and freebies to test the games. We'd write where the bugs were. We'd submit the bugs. They'd go back, the software engineers, and correct them. And it was cool. I got a lot of the original cartridges because Atari was a little different. You couldn't, the guys that actually wrote the code never got credit for the games. They got the basic salary that just about everybody else did. Most of those guys that worked for my father, they branched off to Activision and all these other companies because it was far more lucrative. And honestly, the games were probably a lot better. They were a lot more fun to play and all, but it was cool because I got to meet them, get pictures with them, get signed cartridges back then. That was like a cool thing back in the day.
Speaking of childhood, though, my dad was an electrical mechanic for the FAA, working on airplanes, and then he started working for the FAA, yada yada yada, and then I don't know the specific story, but he ended up with an entire warehouse of stuff from a mom and pop. It's not Radio Shack, but basically Radio Shack, but they went out of business. So we had crates and boxes of electrical components when I was a kid, and I just started playing with it, soldering, building stuff. My first grade project was an AM/FM radio that could actually tune into the emergency frequencies and everything. And obviously I got first place.
Nice.
So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty exciting stuff with technology. Once you get into it, it becomes, to me, it's a hobby. And I always tell people I'm always going to these things where they're asking for career advice in business, this and that. I said, don't focus so much on degrees and this and that. I said, find something that's your passion. If that's your hobby, and you can go to work every day and do something that you love, you'll probably make good money at it someday, but you're going to love it and you're going to get excited about it. And I think that's more important. I can walk home at night and say, hey, we did something cool today. We innovated. We solved the problem. We had a bad guy arrested. We had saved somebody's life with our technology, whatever. Those things make you feel good. And I think that's important because there's not enough of that in life in general. Most people I talk to, friends in the, out there, they have a 9 to 5 and they hate their job. They hate their boss. They don't like it. They don't enjoy it. They just go there for the paycheck.
2-part response. A, I like to say it's a lifestyle, not a job. And B, you should tell us about some of your stories about how you actually did save lives.
Yeah, and I agree with you about a lifestyle. That's true because it becomes you, and you kind of give that off. One story I'll share short. I think I talked to you guys a little bit about the other night. Our product, Wolfhound Pro, again, it's legal. We sell it. It's not that expensive. It's used to find cell phones. It's coupled with a 9 dBi gain directional antenna, so you can actually steer toward a target signal and discriminate if you want to look at this signal or this signal and a few other things. It's handheld, lightweight, all those other good things that people want to use. And we never really targeted the search and rescue market. However, a couple people bought it because they saw the value in it. We didn't really understand search and rescue. We were really focused more on government agencies and things of that sort, corrections, where we're selling more volumes of the tool. But there was a terrible avalanche a few years ago. This wasn't too many years ago. I'm thinking about 3 years ago, 4 years ago or something in the French Alps. And there's a whole bunch of people at the bottom, and they saw the avalanche coming. They ran, and a mother and 2 kids, they just missed the base of where the avalanche came down, but the father got trapped. And it happened to be trapped right next to a tree or whatever, but it was about 2.5 meters of snow on top of them, which is a lot of snow, and it's very heavy, and it's hard to breathe. You don't have much time, so you got to find the person quick. They instantly dispatched all the villagers there at the base of the Alps, and it was about 140 some people, handed them sticks and stuff, and they poke in the ground to, I guess, find somebody or hear somebody or something. Couldn't find the guy, and they walked the path, walked back, brought out the search dog, smelled, couldn't find the guy. Everybody's panicking. He's going to die soon. He can't get air. Somebody said, hey, I got this thing called a Wolfhound Pro from these guys, Berkeley Varitronics. It finds cell phones. Did he have a cell phone on him? They're like, yeah, he did. So the guy lit it up, started walking, and all of a sudden it beep, beep, beep. And he's like, guys, come over here. I got a signal. And they start digging and digging. Next thing you know, all these people are digging, and they actually found the guy at the bottom. He could have like a broken bone or something like that, but they got him, fully rescued, survived. Yeah. And then they put this out on the media. And this was before we learned about it, which was kind of fascinating to read it. And our French reseller called us up and congratulated. And he at that time said, geez, I just sold another 23 systems. They were mounting them in helicopters, and they have certain routes to do search and rescue and over parks where people get lost or fall or get hurt. And he said, congratulations, you just saved a life. And now that they've dubbed you guys the lifesaver, the Wolfhound Pro or something. And we were proud and excited about it, and the press interviewed us, so on and so forth. But the cool part was all of a sudden the word of mouth business went out to the search and rescue community around the globe. And next thing you know, we're getting orders in from all over the world, and in China and the Netherlands and Brazil and here and there for search and rescue and collapsed buildings and fire, all kinds of things. People want to have this as a standard tool so they could quickly find a person that's possibly trapped with a cell phone on them. So it directly led to a ton of business. But more importantly, we felt good because we could quantify and say, wow, we developed technology that was used to actually save a life. Man, that makes you feel good.
Oh yeah.
And then there's we have another product we developed was called a transit hound. We still sell it today, and it's used on the locomotives. We're a little more than 25,000 locomotives. It's a cell phone detection engine. It's a black box. It's covertly hidden up in top of a locomotive so nobody sees it, and the antenna is hidden. But if the operator of a locomotive does this and starts texting or surfing the internet, it triggers DVR and cameras, records it all, sends it back to headquarters, and then they get reprimanded or fired or whatever else. But it's really the result of the FRA, the Federal Rail Authority, put into place back in around 2010. After 2008, there was a terrible train crash in Chatsworth, California, and about 25 people died. That was on LA Metro, the passenger rail, because the operator was distracted, missed the signals, and the train collided, killing them. They said there has to be mandatory technology to prevent personal electronic devices distracting an operator. And to my knowledge, to this day, there's really nothing out there that actually combats that problem. There are vision systems to see if you fall asleep or your eyes wander away from where you should be looking. But we're the only company, to my knowledge, today that has got a actual black box solution. And I think that's why we're on 25,000 plus trains, and we're delivering. It's probably well over 1,000 units per year. We just steadily building them. A little more than 100 a month we're shipping out, and it's hitting all the different major rail locomotives. Not on the passenger side. And many people ask me, well, why aren't you doing it there? That's where the people are. You think that'd be more important? Well, again, as you dig into the numbers and things, where are the liabilities and risks when you have a locomotive going down the track and they've got 100 cars behind it that have crazy toxic chemicals? If that train ever derails and crashes, the cost of the liability destroying a town or something like that is in the millions or billions of dollars. So their focus is on the locomotives as opposed to protecting the people from having a train derail, if that makes any sense. I would say follow the numbers in business, and that's usually where the money is spent.
Wow, I had no idea before we had talked about that being such a threat with people not paying attention when steering trains. It's like it's on their phones, not doing what they're supposed to, and
pretty scary. And there's an interesting example. We developed what I call the core cell phone detection engine and the algorithms and the software firmware and the hardware, because it's an RF front engine we designed from scratch. We're not buying a module off the shelf. The hardcore RF design was done here, and the IP and the algorithms, everything we own. Who would think something that was so simple? It started out with combating a problem with phones coming into prisons, that it branched to catching cheating students with our little pocket hound, and we sold thousands of those, going into the correction facilities, and then expanding that out onto the rail. It's just mind-blowing. Who would think a market would, in my opinion, I would think it'd be this small. And we found out it's really this big when you really look at it, when it's appropriately designed and simplified for the end user to be effective.
yeah, I mean, it's really amazing what this technology can do when it's in the right hands, and how horrible it can be when it's in the wrong hands.
Yeah.
Drew, is there any other question you want to ask Scott, or vice versa? We got a few minutes left, and then we're going to have to go offline.
Yeah, I was just curious from Drew, from the TSCM side. I find that area fascinating. We're members of Espionage Research International down in DC, that group, and I present there often. Do you see the threat landscape continually changing and evolving? Because it seems to me that every year the threats in the world of espionage is just, it's hard to keep up with it sometimes. Do you see that too from your standpoint?
Yeah, so I work with talented people in the TSCM space. I would not say I am in the TSCM space.
Okay, gotcha.
The space that I'm mostly work in is the offensive capability space when it comes to RF. So EW and stuff like that, building the tooling and the algorithms behind those toolings on that. So I couldn't answer you from a TSCM peer capability. I have people I know who I can get back to you with that would be able to give you a appropriate answer to that. But I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in that space. I can tell you that the espionage space is ever evolving, and that outside of just surveillance devices and communications interception, that there is a new field that has been developing for the last 10 years. And I say new because espionage has been, is almost as old as time itself.
Yes.
But so 10 years is still relatively new. There are, tons of advancements when it comes to the RF signature of each person, right? So the RF persona, and what that bleeds out to other people that can take that information, just passive metadata, basically, that you're always emitting based off the devices that you have on you. doesn't matter the data itself that you're transmitting. It's just that you are transmitting. You carry these devices with you. That is being used heavily in the espionage space to define the potential assets and stuff like that. Right.
Wow, that's cool.
So,
Yeah, we had
It's
it's
scary
funny.
what you can do with just probe requests.
it's not even requests. You don't have to send anything. You're capturing literally just their emissions themselves, right? You're always emitting something if you carry electronics or if you're driving a vehicle from 2008 or newer, right? With TPMS and all these other items. So you don't have to probe anything. It's a total passive item that you can utilize to build a targeting list and to build a lifestyles, projections for someone when it comes to what they're going to do that day and stuff like that.
Oh wow! I was just talking about Wi-Fi probe requests, but yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt. Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a lot of we actually we did a research project, and I'm talking back in the 90s, so this dates back a long time, but we paid a lot of money for it. And back then we had to try to fingerprint ID and discriminate between phone to phone, between manufacturers and stuff based upon the RF engine inside of it and slight variance in parts and things like that. And at the end of it, we weren't real successful. I think, to your point, with more modern smartphones, the number of things, it's a Swiss Army knife now, where you've got, your near field communication, your Bluetooth low energy, Wi-Fi, phones that are not just a single band or frequency. You've got multi-band, multi-frequency, multi-modulation techniques, power saving. There's so much junk going on in a phone that I think nowadays, if you had to give it a RF fingerprint in a sense and discriminate, you kind of could fairly easy. Then add in all the metadata. Geez, it's as good as telling you, hey, here's my phone number, here's my name, here's my IMSI, whatever. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah, I can confirm. I can't tell you the method of how it's done, just because it's proprietary. But
Sure.
I can confirm to you that there are companies that can identify what model of phone that you have based off of those sporadic emissions and stuff like that. So
that's powerful. That's pretty cool. Yeah.
So I've got one, if I might, if you guys can hear me now.
Sure.
Yep.
Yes. Cool. All right. So a little context. I am the current sitting CISO for a nonprofit that deploys to places that have been hit with natural disasters and provides communications, usually in the form of radios and tower for law enforcement and first responders. So I don't have nearly the experience with cellular. I've got a little bit of radio experience, but I don't have nearly the experience with cellular. In the infinite multiplicity of things, where would you recommend that I start to be able to help my team to better equip us for things that we might? And I hadn't even thought about searching for cell phones as we were doing things like that, as we deploy to places like that. That's a fantastic idea. Where would you recommend somebody like me start?
Well, one suggestion, if you are working with natural disasters and different groups and law enforcement, so on and so forth, see if you would qualify to get access to public safety phones. Mm-hmm. They've got, you got band 14, so you get prioritized usage over everyone else with the mm-hmm. AT&T network. And mm-hmm. I think if you apply for grants and you get that approved, they actually give you the phone.
Mm-hmm. We've already got those. I do.
You do have that, and you're using
Yes,
it?
We already have those. Yes.
Then I think that's probably the number one thing. If I had to pick, that's going to be the most successful. Go back in time to 9/11 and the disaster. We were contacted, and it was a disaster with just across the board between communications, and we really focused in on helping with direction, finding capability, finding people that were trapped in the rubble, mm-hmm. and some of the techniques and things like that at the particular time. But if you fast forward from that time period to now, communications have gotten a lot better, yet how many more people are using cell phones mm-hmm. and how much data and throughput yep. and complexities are going on. It's pretty amazing it all works. I could mm-hmm. tap my phone and watch a video now. Go back 10 years ago, do you think you could even do that? No, not really. So mm-hmm. the advances are pretty amazing with the efficiencies and use of spectrum, I think. That sure. Now, that being said, if there's a natural disaster and the towers go down, mm-hmm.
Ham
towers
radio.
go
That's
down.
that's where the
Fantastic.
radios come in, right?
Yeah, that's where I was contacted recently with bringing in partners and working with like local ham operators that could be dispatched immediately in geographic areas and help bridge the gap so they could basically get basic communication and email so loved ones can communicate to their family. And that's what we're trying to, and I can certainly send you more information as soon as I get that. I literally had the conversation a week and a half ago with a colleague, and they said that they're going full steam ahead and trying to get, and it's a not-for-profit, and get that all organized so it could be utilized to really help people if there ever is another natural disaster like that somewhere isolated in the United States or abroad. And I think it's a good idea. It's hard to do with all the legalities and complexities and things, but hams are techies, and I think they're pretty good at taking on that challenge. So
The ham radio guys are pretty serious about the natural disaster stuff. Like they do
Yes, they are.
practice runs all the time. They
Yeah.
do weekly nets just to make sure their radios work.
Every Wednesday.
Yeah,
Every Wednesday. Yep.
Now,
it's every
was your-
Monday for me.
Was your
Yeah.
question more of detecting people, or was
So
it a
it was
pace
more
plan type thing?
kind of
pick-
understanding the technology, right? In terms, this is an opportunity for me to learn more, so I understand the technologies and the things that it can do better, because I have zero experience in cellular other than, hey, I've got a cell phone, let's do the thing, right? So like what would be usable, not necessarily just in that space, but as you brought up that space, that's relevant to my interests as well.
Oh, look at one of Drew's
Yeah.
talks.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, easy enough.
Yeah. So the space that you just are looking into would be PACE planning. So PACE is an acronym, PACE. It's primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency, right? And there's tons of great resources out there about how to build your own PACE plan. Now, there's a ton of bad information out there as well. But I would start there, right? If you're starting, we'll say starting from zero, and I'm not saying you're starting from zero, right? But I'm saying let's for anyone that is starting from zero, looking up a building or looking up what other people are using for their plans and understand the benefits and the downfalls of each one, right? So like just in 60 seconds, I'll give you a quick synopsis about like my plan, right? So my primary is cellular, right? The benefit of that is I can communicate via voice, via pictures, via text communication, secure and insecure, right? Text and communications. Perfect primary thing. My alternate is a sat phone that I carry with me, right? It's a Iridium sat phone that I have. It doesn't do, it can do pictures very slowly, but it does text and voice very well, right? If the cell towers are gone. And then my backup from that is another satellite technology. It's Starlink, right? So that's my C, right? It can allow me to use my everyday devices with ease because I can communicate to the Starlink system through wireless or hook it up to my larger network, right? And then my emergency would be some type of ham radio, right? If I'm trying to communicate locally, it would be, VHF, around me, or UHF. Or if I'm trying to communicate a little bit further away, I'd be using HF. And that has a benefit of I can do voice communication, and the other benefit of other people will be setting up those nets to be able to listen and respond to those calls. But it's not as powerful as being able to talk to someone directly. So, but looking up like emergency communication planning and the reasoning behind them, and I haven't given a talk about like PACE planning and stuff like that, though. I have clients that hire me just exactly for that, right? And that's not what I'm trying to say is like, don't hire me. I'm saying go and find the resources around emergency communications, and then understand once you find like, oh, okay, they're using this technology, they're using that, just start looking into those technologies from a user perspective, not even from a techie perspective, so that you can understand what are some of the benefits and what are some of the downfalls at a high level that are going to be relevant to first responders or long-term emergency response crews. So
Mm-hmm.
What type of a cell phone do you use?
I use an iPhone 16 Pro Max is what I have right
So-
now.
Gross.
So
What
comes
else
from
is
here.
in the iPhone?
Satellite communication
Yeah.
through
The basic
Iridium.
Global
right
Star,
here.
right?
Yep.
So yeah,
um,
keep in mind that too. So many people already have the module in there for SAT communication in their phone. You're probably not using it, but it's forthcoming between what Musk is doing and Iridium and Global Star. That's, in my opinion, that's part of the future between tracking people, between espionage, between all the things that we talked about today, communicating in corrections facilities where you shouldn't be. A lot of people are looking toward satellite technology as it's starting to advance, although it's still got a ways to go because it does not have great throughput, and it's so stinking expensive to put the birds up there and all the stuff. Let's just say we developed over the course of a number of years all the base station timing for the Global Star system. So it was Hughes Network, Ericsson, and Qualcomm, and then one of them backed out, and then we came in and were hired to develop all the timing and the redundancy. This is for all ground-based stuff. So if something drops, immediately we have the timing accurately aligned because of all the delays and other things. So we've had to accurately align our timing signal, extracting it from GPS, rubidium, for very precision timing is critical for the satellite network. So that helps you from a standpoint of a hacker thinking if you ever wanted to disrupt communications for the future of satellites, where do you target? You target all the ground stations, all the ground-based communication and timing, because you can cause havoc for everything. And it's really scary how easy it is to do a lot of that. But think about some of the stuff like that's built into your phone already for emergency communication, because when somebody blows out the networks for basic wireless communication, now you can at least resort to satellite, and that gives you something to fall back on. I like the thought about ham radios too. That's just as important probably. So having a multi-prong approach is probably the most important. Understanding those different technologies and learning about it, how to pivot from one to the other, that's really critical for a disaster.
You know,
And knowing the different
ham radio,
technologies too.
the ham radio group you're looking for is called RACES, RACES.
Yep.
That's the emergency group. Also, having worked at a ground station before, I can tell you it is incredibly easy to mess up a satellite system. A very basic snowstorm can take out a dish. Now, one piece of absolute cruelty you can do is when there's a big snowstorm and the dish doesn't work, somebody has to go out there with a broom and sweep the snow out of the dish. And if you are
Been there.
truly an evil person, you can be sitting inside in master control and you can flick the switch that rotates the dish vertically and dump the entire dish full of snow on top of the person who's out there.
We'd have to knock
I have a
the
feeling
ice
you know that
off
from
of the
experience
pistons.
there.
Yeah.
I that is from experience. But the thing
Excellent.
is that the different satellite systems, C band versus say K band or KU, they can be more sensitive. A paintball gun on the at the focal point, forget about it. You're done. Anybody can run a, if you've ever seen the movie This Quiet Earth, you can run a pickup truck into the side of a satellite dish and take it out. The funny thing is, there's even been stories of Starlink where feral cats have sat on top of the Starlink dish and knocked out the service because it was too cold outside. So whenever you're thinking
This is
about
warm.
things, a little. It's not as bad
Cause
as that poor
catastrophe.
Russian security guard. I don't know if you heard about that. That was microwave. There was a Russian security guard who would stand in front of a microwave antenna in order to stay warm because it was so cold outside. And one day they found him basically cooked from the inside out. But the other thing is, too, simplistic stuff. You're talking about ham radios. First of all, you've got to get licensed, which is fairly easy. But if you're using it commercially, you have to tell Uncle Charlie that you're doing it commercially. And even if you're not using ham radios, if you're using regular, VHF radios on a business band that you own or something, don't forget the basics. Carry an extra battery. Okay, you drop your radio in the snow, in the water, in the toilet, and you get one battery out, slap another one in, and maybe you'll save it, maybe you won't. But the thing is, there's so many times you've been talking to somebody during either a disaster drill or a disaster exercise, which we had a lot of after 9/11.
Having a little solar panel in your pack is usually good too.
Yeah, that's kind of new though. The solar panels that you can stick on your back, Jackery makes a really nice one. I have that for my wheelchair, and I have a Jackery battery with a solar panel recharger for my wheelchair. Makes it look like I'm right out of the Flintstones. But there's nothing worse than being in a disaster and hitting that transmit button and realizing that your battery's dead and there aren't any spares.
So to wrap it up, both Drew and Scott going first and then Drew, some parting words of advice, wisdom for the audience. How do you want to end it?
Sure. I always like to encourage people, even though sometimes we talk about doom and gloom, nothing's 100% secure, but having knowledge and sharing knowledge, you can implement best practices. You can stay secure, be it your credit card, your communications, your online presence, whatever it is. Having that basic knowledge can empower you to survive through pretty much anything and stay one step ahead of most other people that end up being hacked and being compromised. So it's important, really. Cybersecurity is all of our business, to learn and implement it so that we can stay safe and not be in fear of using technology and things, but we could rather embrace it then.
Thank you, Scott. And
There you
Drew,
go.
the final word.
Oh, lots of pressure. The when it comes to items, again, everyone loves to go to that doom and gloom aspect, right? In my company, we have a tenet number 4, which is your community is only as good as you make it. But there's a more important item that's not part of one of our 10 tenets in the company, which is you don't have a community until you make one yourself, or you actually go out there and join one. So if you try to go join one and you don't see one, you got to make it. And you may not be the person that wants to go make it, but you have to make it because there'll be other people like you who want it. Or if you're lucky, there might already be a community for you out there, and you won't know about it until you actually put yourself out there and find that community. So make sure you go do that, right? Ending in the vein of emergency preparedness and stuff like that. You need a community, and if it's not there, make it. But if it is there, go out and meet your community. Befriend your neighbors.
If you build it, they will come, because there's a lot of like-minded people that are looking for the same thing.
Absolutely. Very well said. All right. Well, thank you all for joining. That is our cast for this week. I am playing the outro now.
Is it a cool one?
Great.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
Stay
Scott.
safe, Paul. Thank you. Great to be on with everybody.
Indeed. And yep,
If Happy can find the button,
There's a button here somewhere.
Can't find the button. Can't find the button.
It exists, I promise. A little to the left.
Maybe that's
all right, hackers and cyber warriors, it's time to encrypt this episode and send it out into the digital ether. Thank you to Sledge, Delchi, CrowdStrong, and Altkey for another epic nerd out session. And a special thanks to our guests for joining us. And to all our listeners out there in the cyber trenches, patch fast, encrypt tight, lock down your ports, and leave no backdoor open. Hunt threats like it's open season. Keep your passwords long, your MFA enabled. Don't use SMS as a second factor. Keep your malware signatures up to date, your critical data backed up, and your network locked down like Fort Knox. Until our next PunFest, stay vigilant, stay curious, and above all, stay CounterSurveil. Whether you're pen testing networks or hardening your own defenses, remember, in the game of cybersecurity, you're either the hunter or the hunted. So sharpen those skills, mask those IPs, and we'll see you on the dark side of the net. This is CounterSurveil, where we turn paranoia into preparation, shutting down but never.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.